If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter
Additionally, if you would like to
341
request novels
Caterpie's
and
Dream.
access my Google
Team
Drive
Rocket
where I have
strikes.
200 plus
The
audiobooks,
two of them
then you can
started
join my
arguing on the
Patreon.
spot,
Link is
neither
also
willing to
provided in the
back down.
description.
In the end,
Additionally, if
Misty
you would
huffed
like
and
to
turned
request
away,
novels and
refusing
access
to
my
speak
Google
to
Drive
Ash
where
out
I
of
have
spite.
200 plus
The
audiobooks,
comment
then you
section
can join my
erupted into
Patreon.
chaos.
Link is also provided
I'm
in
a
the
guy,
description.
but I'm on Misty's side.
Additionally, if you would
Bugs
like to
really are
request
kind
novels
of,
and access
you
my
know.
Google Drive where I have
I think it's a
200
little
plus
creepy too,
audiobooks, then you
but
can
Ash
join
has
my
a point.
Patreon. Link is also
It's so
provided in the
innocent.
description.
Misty's Gapmo is too adorable. One second she's like a fierce tigress, the next she's terrified of a bug. Time passed, and the scene quickly shifted to nightfall. Ash and Misty appeared to have decided to camp in the forest for the night. A bonfire crackled in the clearing, its dancing flames pushing back the darkness. Ash and Pikachu were already asleep, their breathing slow and steady. But Caterpie was awake. It crawled alone to the top of a tall rock and gazed up at the bright, full moon hanging in the sky. The stars glittered overhead, the Milky Way stretching across the heavens like a ribbon of silver. In Caterpie's wide, round eyes, the entire starry sky was reflected. Caterpie! Caterpie! It called out softly, as if whispering something to the moon. Pikachu nearby hadn't quite fallen asleep. It opened its eyes, looked at Caterpie's silhouette, and let out a quiet sound. Pika Pika! Caterpie turned around, looked at Pikachu, and began waving its body expressively. Caterpie, Caterpie! No one could understand what it was saying, but those longing eyes and the way it kept glancing up at the sky said everything. It wanted to fly. It didn't want to spend its life crawling along the ground. It wanted to soar through the blue sky, free as the birds above. Pikachu listened quietly, its gaze softening. It gently patted Caterpie on the head, as if offering encouragement. The scene had no human dialogue whatsoever, conveying everything purely through the Pokémon's movements and cries, yet somehow it stirred something unexpectedly tender in the heart. The comment feed slowed, everyone moved by the moment. Poor Caterpie. Being rejected like that must have hurt. What is Caterpie saying? It keeps looking up at the sky. Is it saying it wants to fly? That's heartbreaking to watch. Pikachu can actually be really gentle, so why is it never like that with Ash? The production team is something else. They express this kind of emotion so perfectly without a single word of dialogue. Dan the Demon King watched the scene and found himself lost in thought. Since Caterpie is based on a caterpillar, is it possible it could evolve into a butterfly? He typed out the comment casually. It immediately sparked a wave of discussion. Hard to say. These are Pokémon, not real bugs. Maybe it stays a caterpillar forever. I think it can evolve. This is a world of magic. Anything's possible. If it evolves into a butterfly, Misty won't be scared of it anymore, right? I hope it evolves too. Caterpie works so hard. It deserves to have wings. The night passed without incident. The next morning, sunlight once again poured through the trees and lit up the forest floor. Ash and Misty packed up their things and set off again. Just as they reached a clearing, a sharp bird cry split the air above them. Shriek! A dark shape plummeted from the sky, whipping up a gust of wind strong enough to make Ash squint. It was a bird Pokémon, considerably larger than a common sparrow, with brown feathers and razor-sharp talons. It's a Pidgey. Ash's eyes lit up. He pulled out his Pokédex to confirm. Pidgey, the tiny bird Pokémon. Its talons are highly developed. It can snatch prey in its claws and carry it back to its nest over 60 miles away. All right. I'm catching you. Without a second thought, he hurled a Pokeball. Go, Pokeball! But Pidgey was nothing like the docile Caterpie from the day before. It flipped nimbly through the air, snapped its wing forward, and batted the incoming ball right back. Crack! The Pokeball burst open in midair. Misty's voice followed immediately, dripping with disdain. I knew it. You have to battle a Pokémon before you can catch it. Caterpie only let you catch it because it's weak, just like the idiot throwing the ball. Ugh, fine. We'll do this the hard way. Go, Caterpie! Ash sent out Caterpie again. Misty saw this and immediately screamed. You moron! Flying types beat bug types. What kind of brain sends a bug Pokémon to fight a bird? Do you have absolutely zero common sense? Ash froze, his hand pausing mid-motion. Hey? Is that a thing? But Caterpie was already out. He looked around, clearly still confused. And then he saw something charging straight at him. Pidgey launched its attack. It dove straight down, its sharp beak cutting through the air like a blade aimed at Caterpie. Caterpie! Caterpie had no time to dodge. Pidgey slammed into it hard, sending it tumbling across the ground several times. Caterpie! Ash went pale. Pidgey didn't stop. It circled overhead and dove again, even faster this time. Caterpie could only scramble desperately along the ground to avoid the strikes, completely unable to fight back. It was taking a brutal beating. The comment section filled with anguished cries. Sending a bug to fight a bird, even I know not to do that, Ash, come on. Type matchups? So that's an actual mechanic in this world? Certain types are weak to others. Looks like it. Flying beats bug, like rock paper scissors. What type is Pikachu? Electric? What does electric beat? Dan the Demon King frowned at the screen, then his expression shifted to realization. So type matchups are actually a thing in this world. And they mirror real life pretty closely. How many types are there in total? On screen, Pidgey's beak began to glow with blinding light as it dove at Caterpie again. Ash completely panicked. Caterpie, come back. Pikachu, it's up to you. Pikachu. Pikachu had been ready. The moment it heard the command it leapt off Ash's backpack, the electric sacs on its cheeks crackling with energy. Pika. Chu. A bolt of golden electricity tore through the air and struck Pidgey dead on. Shriek. Pidgey let out a pained cry, smoke rising from its body, and plummeted to the ground in a heap, knocked completely unconscious. Pikachu always comes through. That damage output. It one-shot it. So that's how type matchups work? Incredible. Misty chimed in from the side, that's more like it. Electric types beat flying types. The comment section connected the dots instantly. Electric beats flying. A bird getting struck by lightning is a hard counter, that actually makes sense. Ash's brain is running on fumes. It's basically all Pikachu carrying him. With Pidgey knocked out, Ash wasted no time and threw a Pokeball. Go! The ball sucked Pidgey in with a flash of red light. This time, the Pokeball rolled and shook wildly on the ground, rocking left and right, each wobble ratcheting up the tension in the room. Finally. Ding! The ball went still. Capture successful. Ash ran over and scooped it up, striking his signature triumphant pose. I caught a Pidgey. But before Ash could celebrate for long, a strange plume of smoke began to billow from deep within the forest. Bang! 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 Several explosions rang out, and a massive Meowth-shaped balloon rose slowly into view. Standing atop it were three familiar figures. Red hair. Blue hair. And a Meowth walking upright on two legs. Team Rocket, making their grand entrance. The live stream chat exploded. Not these guys again. Didn't they get blasted off last time? Here we go. They're back. Somehow I've already heard this intro twice and it never gets old. The man and woman with their own theme music. The trio leapt down from the balloon and landed squarely in front of the two trainers. Jessie struck an elegant pose and pointed at Ash. Hey, twerp. We meet again. James pointed right alongside her. Twerp, you're not getting away this time. You two again. Ash blinked. Misty beside him was completely lost. Excuse me, who are you people? How rude. But the moment those words left her mouth, the trigger was pulled. A burst of dramatic music blared out of nowhere. Jessie posed elegantly. Since you're asking so sincerely. James produced a rose from seemingly thin air and followed right on cue. We'll graciously tell you. The two moved in perfect sync, as though they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Jessie, to protect the world from devastation. James, to unite all peoples within our nation. Jessie, to denounce the evils of truth and love. James, to extend our reach to the stars above. Jessie, Jessie. James, James. Meowth leapt out between them and struck a pose. Team Rocket, blasting off at the speed of light. Surrender now, or prepare to fight. Meowth, that's right. Meowth. That slick, rehearsed routine, paired with those wonderfully absurd lines, set the comment feed flying once again. I've memorized the whole speech at this point. No matter how many times I hear it, the moment Meowth drops that last Meowth, that's right, I lose it every time. Once the performance was over, Jessie cut straight to the point. Hand over that rare Pikachu, kid. Ash instinctively pulled Pikachu closer. Rare Pikachu. James nodded vigorously. That one right there. The one that produces unusually powerful electric currents. It's special. Ash scratched his head and looked down at the Pikachu in his arms with a genuinely puzzled expression. But Pikachu are basically as common as stray dogs on the street. The air seemed to freeze for a full second. Then the livestream chat completely lost its mind. Stray dogs. Pikachu is a stray dog. Legendary line. This is absolutely a legendary moment. Pikachu, I beg your pardon. I'm dying. Ash's brain operates on a completely different wavelength. Meowth heard that and wants to throw hands. Pidgey heard that and wants to cry. Even Dan the Demon King couldn't hold back a laugh. James turned beet red, clearly struck speechless. Quit stalling. Attack. He flicked his wrist and 2 Pokeballs flew out at once. Go, awakens. Coughing, let's go. 2 poison-type Pokemon materialized on the field, radiating menace. Seeing them act so brazenly, Misty stepped forward, furious. You've got some nerve ganging up on us like this. Go, Goldeen. She threw her Pokeball and in a flash of red, a red-finned Goldeen appeared on the ground. But then... Gloop, gloop. Goldeen flopped desperately on the dirt, completely unable to move, slapping its tail uselessly against the ground. It couldn't swim, couldn't do anything. Pfff, bahaha. Jessie clutched her stomach, doubled over with laughter. What even is that? James was laughing so hard his face had gone crooked. Misty's face turned red. She recalled Goldeen quickly, flushing. If my Pokemon weren't all water types that can't fight on land, you'd be finished by now. Ash stepped forward immediately. It's okay, Misty, watch me. Go, Pidgey. He threw the Pokeball with full confidence. Spear. Pidgey burst out, but the moment it appeared, it swayed through the air like it was drunk, spun in a couple of circles, and then dropped to the ground with a thud, eyes swirling into spirals, completely out of commission. It had only just been knocked out by Pikachu's Thunderbolt and caught, and hadn't recovered at all. Ha 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 ha. Team Rocket erupted in laughter. Meowth was crying tears of joy, waving its paws gleefully. That kid's just bringing out junk, Meowth. Don't waste our time with these scraps. Get that Pikachu out here, Meowth. Pikachu heard this and shot forward, ready to unleash a thunderbolt. But Coughing moved first. Sludge. Splat. A thick glob of dark sludge shot out and smeared directly over Pikachu's eyes. Pika. Pikachu let out a pained cry, blinded by the sludge, and writhed helplessly on the ground, unable to fight. Pikachu. Are you okay? Ash panicked and tried to run to Pikachu's side, but awakens blocked his path. Misty gritted her teeth, at a loss for what to do. Jessie watched the scene unfold and let out a triumphant laugh. Ha ha ha. You're out of options now, kid. The situation had flipped in an instant. Ash's entire team had collapsed. Now, standing beside him, was only one Pokemon left, the tiny, fragile Caterpie. Ash clenched his jaw. He looked at the powerful enemies in front of him, then back at Pikachu writhing in pain and Pidgey knocked cold on the ground. Caterpie, it all comes down to you now. He crouched down and looked Caterpie in the eyes, his gaze full of trust. Caterpie didn't flinch. It looked at Ash's unwavering expression, and from somewhere deep inside that small body, a surge of courage rose up. Caterpie. It marched forward to the front line with determination. Twerp, just give it up already, Jessie said, waving her hand dismissively. And what on earth is this thing? Looks like a total weakling, Meowth. Meowth bared its claws, already itching for a fight. Awakens eyed the unremarkable little bug, let out a dismissive hiss, and lunged forward with its jaws wide open. At that razor's edge of a moment, something shifted in Caterpie. It entered a state of pure, burning fury. It had been looked down on again. But not anymore. It couldn't keep letting this happen. It opened its mouth wide. String shot. Chapter 342 Metamorphosis, Cynthia's new game plus in Emerald. A white silk thread shot out like a bolt of lightning, wrapping precisely around Awakens' head. Before Awakens could even react, its vision was blocked by the thread, its body losing balance as it thrashed around wildly. What? Jessie cried out in shock. Coughing moved to help, drifting over, only to be caught by another thread from Caterpie that wrapped around its body. Caterpie! Caterpie yanked hard, sending Coughing crashing straight into Awakens. The two massive Pokémon tumbled together in a heap. Meowth saw things going south and charged in with its claws, trying to land a sneak attack. Caterpie spun around and fired another thread, wrapping it around Meowth's foot and leaving it dangling upside down in midair. All three of Team Rocket's Pokémon were subdued in an instant, and as their enormous bodies toppled over, they landed squarely on Jessie and James, who had no time to get out of the way. Aik! They're so heavy! Someone help! Jessie, pinned under Awakens, couldn't move an inch. She let out a wail. How could we lose to a Caterpie? James struggled beneath Coughing. Curse you! At that moment, Pikachu had already managed to shake the mud off its face. Pikachu! Ash called out. Pikachu understood immediately. A blinding flash of electricity crackled through the air. Boom! With a thunderous explosion, Team Rocket went blasting off again, disappearing into the horizon like a shooting star. What a horrible feeling! The voices faded and faded, until there was silence. In the livestream chat, everyone had been holding their breath since moments ago. Now, they finally exhaled. Holy crap! Caterpie is insane! I'm crying, nobody believed in you, and yet you came through the most. Who says bug types are weak? Caterpie is the GOAT. Y'all were grossed out by it earlier, how's that crow taste? The battle was over. The battlefield fell quiet again. Ash ran over and scooped Caterpie into his arms, so excited he could barely get the words out. You were incredible, Caterpie. You're amazing. Then, something unexpected happened. Caterpie's body suddenly began to emit a soft white glow, which shifted into a brilliant, rainbow-colored radiance. This is... Both Ash and Misty froze. Before their eyes, Caterpie's body began to change within the light. Its soft worm-like form started to harden, its shape shifting and transforming. The light grew brighter and brighter, illuminating everything around it. Is this evolution? Misty gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Seconds later, the light faded. The little green Caterpie was gone. In its place stood a creature with a massive, hard shell and vivid green eyes. Metapod. Caterpie evolved. It became a Metapod. Ash stared at the Metapod before him, eyes shining with excitement. It was the first time he had ever witnessed a Pokémon evolve with his own eyes. Metapod, I'm counting on you from here on out. Pikachu, still sporting a not quite clean ring of black mud around one eye, hopped over to offer its congratulations, Pika Pika. Misty, who had always been terrified of bugs, found herself staring at the hard-shelled Metapod, and for once, she didn't scream. She stepped closer, peeked at it carefully, and muttered quietly. This one isn't so bad, actually. The chat filled with warm, affectionate reactions. It evolved. So that's what evolution looks like. Called it. I knew it could change. Metapod looks so solid, that defense stat must be off the charts. Misty's attitude shift is so real, a hard shell is definitely easier to deal with than a squishy worm. Since it's a cocoon now, a butterfly is next. Congrats Caterpie, one step closer to flying free. Dan the Demon King watched the scene unfold and smiled with quiet satisfaction. That was a good episode, he said, leaning back in his chair. Type matchups, villain debut, an underdog victory, and an evolution. A lot going on, but the pacing was spot on. And especially that little monologue from Caterpie before the final burst, the emotional build-up was really well done. Man, this show is just good. Just as he finished his thought, those familiar words appeared on screen again. To be continued. Even if everyone still wanted more, this time nobody had a meltdown like before, because they all knew the next episode would come eventually, and it would be just as good. Production team, you legends. What's Misty's Pokémon called again? I kind of forgot. Is Pidgeotto evolving next episode? I'm so hyped. Can Pikachu even evolve? Dan the Demon King looked at the chat and shrugged. These questions you're all asking. I want to know too. Just wondering when episode 4 is going to drop. Meanwhile, at MT Coronet. Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the floor in a faint golden hue. Cynthia stood by the window, a warm cup of black coffee cradled in her hands, her gaze drifting toward the vast blue sky in the distance. The weather today was almost unfairly beautiful, one of those rare, perfect days in Sinnoh. Garcomp behind her seemed to sense its trainer's thoughts and stood quietly at her side. "You're right, it's a lovely view," Cynthia said softly, taking a small sip. "But if that crisis in the ghost world hadn't been resolved, if that rift between worlds hadn't been sealed, we wouldn't get to enjoy weather like this." The weight of it pressed on her. The ghost world incident had reminded her, once again, of her own limits. Even with everything she had, there were still things beyond her reach. Garcomp blinked, as if genuinely pondering this, then gently rubbed the top of its head against the back of her hand, as if to say, "Don't think too hard about it." Cynthia smiled faintly and finished the rest of her coffee in one go. The languid ease she'd carried a moment ago vanished entirely, replaced by the sharpness and composure that came with being Sinnoh's champion. "All right, enough heavy thoughts. It's a new day, time to keep moving forward." She walked over to her desk, opened her streaming software with practiced ease, adjusted the camera, and clicked that familiar green icon, Emerald. As the stream went live, the chat erupted like a wave that had been held back for far too long. "Good morning, Lady Cynthia. Finally, you're live. Yesterday that streamer next door had an Turtonator that was absolutely cursed, I couldn't stop laughing. What are you playing today? Still New Game Plus? My queen drinking coffee is the most beautiful thing, so this is what champion life looks like." Looking at the flood of greetings, Cynthia smiled gently. "Good morning, everyone. Nice weather today. Let's continue New Game Plus." No one in the chat had any idea what kind of battle she had just fought through in the ghost world. The game had already finished loading. Cynthia opened the team screen. After long hours of grinding at the battle frontier, her team had been completely transformed. Every Pokémon was above level 80, their F-spreads painstakingly cultivated, and her bag was stocked with a mountain of max revives, full restores, and rare held items. It was nothing short of lavish. Her team was more than ready for the challenges of New Game Plus. As she sorted through her bag, Cynthia mentally reviewed where the story had left off. Based on the hints from before, the New Game Plus story seemed to begin in Petalburg City. She recalled that at the start of New Game Plus, Professor Birch had specifically asked her to head to Petalburg, suggesting something there was waiting for her. She guided her character out the door, hopped on the bike, and set off toward Petalburg at full speed. It's starting. New Game Plus story. Sitting back and watching her steamroll everything. Don't get too comfortable though. Ayano got wrecked in her New Game Plus run, and Emerald NG and is supposedly brutal too. Petalburg City. The moment Cynthia arrived, a familiar figure came stumbling toward her in a panic. It was Wally, her neighbor from near the Petalburg gym. His face was flushed, his forehead slick with sweat. Whatever had just happened to him, it wasn't small. Something terrible happened, Strawberry Sundae. Wally grabbed her character's arm, voice rushed. "Just now, people from Team Magma attacked me. They stole my bag and ran deeper into the city. Quick, you have to stop them." Cynthia raised an eyebrow. Team Magma? That evil organization from the first playthrough, the ones who tried to expand the landmass? Weren't they already disbanded? Without overthinking it, she immediately took control and gave chase. In a secluded corner of Petalburg, several figures in red uniforms were huddled together, clearly searching for something. When they saw Cynthia approaching, they spun around, eyes sharp and hostile. "Another meddler." One of them sneered. "If you're looking to get hurt, don't blame us." The battle began instantly. Against grunts like these, Cynthia didn't even need to think. She sent out one of her aces directly, Dracovish. A flash of red light, and there it was, ancient and fierce beneath its armored bones, eyes gleaming with predatory intensity. One hit. Done. The battle ended cleanly, Dracovish didn't take so much as a scratch. "Humph, champion or not, it doesn't matter." One of the grunts snarled, clutching his wounds as he backed away. "We need those meteorite shards, it's for the cause. Don't think you can stop us." With that, they fled. Just then, Cynthia's Pokénav started ringing. On the other end was the serious, measured voice of Devon Corporation's president, Mr. Stone. "Strawberry Sundae, thank you for driving off Team Magma. But I have urgent news. According to our monitoring systems, a massive meteorite is heading straight for Hone. If it isn't stopped, the entire world could face catastrophe. Cynthia paused for a moment. We need the meteorite shards and the legendary power to stop it, Mr. Stone continued. There's a lead on the shards at the granite cave near Dewford Town. Please, you have to go check it out. She hung up. The chat was already buzzing. Wait, saving the world right out of the gate? Didn't we just do this in the first playthrough? A meteorite. Speaking of which, that Devon scope earlier was so useful. The team came together so fast in the early game because of it. Honestly, whoever thought up the EXP share deserves a medal. I actually love that thing. Dewford Town, Cynthia murmured to herself, guiding her character to board the ship heading that way. As the vessel cut through the waves, Cynthia watched the scenery blur past the window, her eyes going slightly distant. A meteorite. The ultimate power. Those words had clearly touched something buried deep in her memory. I suppose this is the opening chapter of New Game Plus, she said softly. It was addressed to the chat, technically, but it sounded more like she was steadying herself. A meteorite, of all things. Her expression shifted, just barely, as if something had surfaced in her mind, but she didn't elaborate. She simply brought her focus back to the screen. Dewford Town. The granite cave. The cave was damp and shadowed, water droplets trickling down the rocky walls with quiet, rhythmic echoes. Cynthia guided her character carefully deeper inside, and soon, in the farthest reaches of the cave, a silhouette came into view. A girl in black, dragon-themed clothing. Her long dark hair drifted behind her, and her eyes held a resolve and urgency that seemed far beyond her years. Sensing Cynthia's approach, the girl spun around sharply, her gaze cutting like a blade. So you're the new champion. I'm Zinnia. Child of the Lore Keeper. Zinnia's voice was cold and clear. Perfect timing. I'll be taking those meteorite shards and that bracelet. Before Cynthia could react, Zinnia moved. A notification flashed across the screen. The Mega Bracelet has been taken. Only I can summon Rayquaza. Only I can save this world. Zinnia clutched the bracelet, her eyes alight with a desperate, almost fanatical intensity. You so-called champions don't understand what it actually costs. She left behind nothing but a small, unassuming shard of meteorite, then turned and walked away without looking back. Obtained, small meteorite shard. Cynthia stared at the now empty bracelet slot, momentarily stunned. The chat absolutely exploded. Are you kidding me? She just robbed you. The Mega Evolution is gone. My Mega Septal. Who even is this girl? She just shows up and starts stealing things. Honestly, classic Emerald. Too bad you can't fight her yet, otherwise one Victini would be more than enough to send her flying, no Mega needed. Cynthia looked at the screen and shook her head with a wry smile. As frustrating as it was to have something taken from her, she had noticed the slight tremor in Zinnia's shoulders, the urgency written across her face. Whatever this girl was after, it wasn't simple greed. There was something else driving her. Emerald was a 2D pixel game, but these kinds of details had always been rendered with care. It felt deliberate. Right then, another call came through from Mr. Stone. Strawberry Sundae, if you've got the meteorite shard, head to the Meteor Falls Technology Center immediately. We need to track the meteorite's trajectory. Fall Arbor Town. The Meteor Falls Technology Center. This was Hoen's most technologically advanced facility, massive radar dishes fixed permanently toward the sky. The moment Cynthia stepped through the doors, the tension in the air hit her immediately. Chapter 343 Rayquaza's Ultimate Power and the Falling Meteor. Several researchers in white lab coats crowded around a massive display screen, their faces etched with panic. Meteor trajectory confirmed. One of them rushed over to Cynthia the moment she arrived, his words tumbling out in rapid succession. Based on our calculations, this meteor will strike the Hoenn region within a week. If we don't stop it, the consequences will be catastrophic. We need Rayquaza's ultimate power to destroy it, the captain added, brow furrowed deeply. But the problem is, Team Magma is also after that final meteor fragment. Rayquaza. The moment she heard that name, Cynthia's pupils contracted sharply. The legendary Lord of the Skies, the hero who had lived in her childhood memories. The New Game Plus storyline actually involved Rayquaza? Back in her first playthrough, she had witnessed the great three-way battle between Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza in Yansei's city. The earth-shattering power she had seen that day still sent a chill through her heart. And now? Rayquaza was about to appear again? What? The fragment is here. Just then, a commotion erupted at the entrance to the hall. A group of Team Magma grunts burst in, led by an admin, weapons glinting coldly in the light. Ha! Looks like we arrived just in time. The Team Magma admin cackled, his greedy eyes locking onto the data tablet in the researcher's hands. We'll be taking that fragment. Just you wait and see. With that, they snatched the fragment and vanished into the crowd like ghosts before the guards could respond. One of the researchers cried out in alarm. Champion, we can track the fragment's location. They seem to be heading toward Meteor Falls. Meteor Falls, one of the most mysterious and breathtaking waterfalls in the Hone region. Deep inside a darkened cavern, a massive waterfall plunged from above, filling the air with mist. Cynthia guided her character forward, battling her way through Team Magma grunts who tried to block her path one after another. Finally, at the very heart of the falls, she spotted May, surrounded on all sides by Team Magma. May looked roughed up. She clutched the Mega Bracelet tightly in her hands, but under the oppressive pressure of Team Magma's leader Maxi, her body trembled uncontrollably. Hand over the bracelet and the fragment. Maxi fixed her with an icy stare, his eyes burning with fanaticism. That meteor belongs to us. We'll use its power to fully revive Groudon, expand the landmass, and dominate this world. You have no idea what you're doing. May ground out through clenched teeth. That will destroy everyone. And what does that matter? Let our souls bear witness to the birth of a new world. Maxi waved his hand, and his Golbat and Camerupt behind him lunged savagely toward May. At that critical moment, a figure stepped in front of her. It was Cynthia. The battle screen flashed open instantly. Facing Maxi's Pokémon, Cynthia held nothing back. Her fully developed Ace team unleashed overwhelming force. Whether it was Victini or the Rain Duo, they swept through Maxi's Pokémon one by one like a storm tearing through dry leaves. Damn it! I lost to you. Maxi stared at his fallen Pokémon, biting down on his frustration, and finally retreated with his subordinates in disarray. The battle over, May sank to the ground and gulped down air in ragged breaths. She looked up at Cynthia, the hostility in May's eyes gradually fading, replaced by something far more complicated. Damn it, beaten by Cynthia. May murmured, then held out the Mega Bracelet. Here. Take it back. The Elder always said that only someone with a pure heart can resonate with Rayquaza. I thought I could do it, but I was too impatient. She raised her head, meeting Cynthia's gaze, and a hint of genuine acknowledgement entered her expression. The Meteor Shrine is above. The Elder who tends it lives up there. Go find him. Maybe, you're the one who was chosen. The chat started rolling in. Looks like May isn't actually a bad person, just way too eager. The story has real depth. Everyone's got their own conviction. Cynthia really is the chosen one. The bracelet is back. Cynthia accepted the bracelet, tucked it away in her bag, gave May a small nod, and turned to head up toward the top of the falls. The Meteor Shrine was an ancient, solemn structure. A bald elder sat cross-legged at its center with his eyes closed, as though he had long anticipated Cynthia's arrival. So you've finally come. The elder opened his eyes slowly, his voice aged and profound. The meteor crisis, the ultra wormhole, all of this is the work of fate. Only Rayquaza's ultimate power can destroy that meteor of destruction. He rose to his feet and pointed to a Flygon standing nearby. Ride it to the summit of Sky Pillar. That is where the Lord of the Skies slumbers. The scene shifted. Cynthia rode the Flygon up through layers of cloud and mist, returning once more to that towering spire that pierced the heavens. During her first visit, she hadn't paid close attention to Sky Pillar's exterior. Coming back now, she was struck by how ancient and immense it felt. She climbed steadily upward. This time, there were none of the crumbling floor tiles that had blocked her before, and she reached the summit with little difficulty. Howling winds swept across the platform as the sea of clouds churned below. And there, at the very center of the platform, May stood before Rayquaza, looking impossibly small. I tried. May turned around, her face heavy with disappointment. Rayquaza won't respond to me. It refuses to answer my call. She stepped aside and looked toward Cynthia. Your turn, champion. Cynthia walked forward and looked up at the legendary creature before her. Rayquaza. We meet again. She took a slow, deep breath and pressed the interaction button. You touch Rayquaza's scales. In that instant, a strange sensation wells up inside you, something that feels like resonance. As though breaking through the boundaries of time and space, two powerful souls collided in that single moment. Rayquaza let out a low, rumbling roar, and for the first time, the coldness was gone. In its place was a trace of recognition. Then a blinding green light erupted from Rayquaza's body and shot straight up into the sky. A system notification appeared. Rayquaza has joined your party. You have forged an ultra bond with Rayquaza. You have obtained ultimate power. Brilliant green radiance flooded the screen as the chat went wild. Holy crap! Those effects are insane. She really can't forget her Rayquaza, can she? Ultra bond, what's that? Is Rayquaza going mega? Armed with its ultimate power, Cynthia returned to the Space Center in Fall Arbor Town. The facility was a flurry of activity, every engineer working furiously on final launch preparations. Everything is ready. The captain looked at Cynthia, barely containing his excitement. The ship can launch. Take Rayquaza with you. We're going into space to stop that meteor. Cynthia made her way to the rear of the Space Center, where a massive rocket stood waiting. Guided by the crew, she boarded the ship with her team. As the countdown reached 0, a thunderous roar shook the earth. The rocket blasted out a column of orange flame and, under tremendous thrust, broke free of gravity and soared into the vast expanse of space. The scene cut to a first-person perspective. Cynthia looked at the screen and let out a quiet sound of wonder. So this was space. Against a deep black backdrop scattered with countless brilliant stars, the blue earth hung in the distance, beautiful and fragile. A massive meteor drifted in the void, its surface churning with fire, trailing a plume of debris that stretched across the void like a scar, bearing down on the earth at terrifying speed. It's so beautiful. The 3D visuals are way too realistic. Is this actually a Pokémon game? That meteor is massive, holy. If that hits, all of Hone is gone. The atmosphere just got incredibly heavy. It actually feels like we're saving the world. Just as Cynthia maneuvered the ship closer to the meteor, something went wrong. The light on the meteor's surface suddenly warped, and a surge of purple energy burst outward, rapidly coalescing into a bizarre, humanoid creature. It had a body of purple crystal, an inverted triangle head, long spindly limbs, and a glowing red core on its chest. This mysterious Pokémon from outer space let out a piercing shriek, a sound that seemed to cut straight through the soul and send an inexplicable shudder down the spine. The battle screen appeared again, and above this Pokémon's head was a golden symbol, identical to the one that had appeared above Regirock. LV85. What Pokémon is this? Cynthia's brow furrowed slightly. Clearly, this was another unknown one. It looks so cool. What kind of alien Pokémon is that? It's so unsettling. Feels even more ominous than the legendary Pokémon from before. ALV85 boss? Cynthia's team is also 80+. This is going to be a fight. Cynthia didn't underestimate it. A boss battle meant special mechanics, just like the Regirock encounter before. Let me probe its typing and moves first. She led with the most well-rounded member of her team, Victini. She gave the command decisively and went with V-Create, her strongest move, to test the waters. But just as V-Create was about to connect, the opponent's body suddenly transformed. Deoxys has switched to defense form. Its previously slender limbs thickened, its head and body rounded out, and the crystals on its surface became far denser, turning it into something resembling an impenetrable fortress. The flames slammed into it and barely produced a spark. The damage hadn't even taken down a fifth of its health bar. Deoxys? Form changing? Defense form? Cynthia immediately began to analyze. This thing's special mechanic was clearly form switching, similar to Rotom. Defense form would be extremely defensive, but its offensive capability should be limited. Then, in the next moment, the core on Deoxys's chest lit up with an eerie glow. Deoxys used Mirror Coat. A blast of fire energy even more powerful than the original V-Create reflected back and slammed directly into Victini. Victini's HP bar emptied instantly. One-hit KO. What? Mirror Coat. The boss can reflect damage? That's absolutely brutal. It has that much bulk? Even tankier than Regirock. Less than a fifth of Deoxys's HP lost on a reflected hit, and Victini is just gone. Cynthia watched the screen, her gaze growing colder and more focused. I see. It can switch forms at the start of a turn to counter incoming attacks. It shifted to defense form just now, which has sky-high special defense, so it used mirror coat as a special counter. She ran through the situation rapidly. If it can reflect special damage, I'll try physical attacks. She sent out Dracovish, her hardest physical hitter. Use Fishious Rend. Dracovish lunged forward with its massive jaws, a torrent of water surging alongside it toward Deoxys. Yet Deoxys transformed again. This time, its body grew sleek and streamlined. Its limbs became extremely thin, like a purple bolt of lightning, speed form. The instant Dracovish launched the attack, Deoxys' silhouette blurred into motion. Deoxys swung one of its slender arms, and a streak of white light carved through the air. Deoxys used Thunderbolt. A massive, dazzling surge of electricity wiped Dracovish's health bar clean. Another instant KO. You've got to be kidding. Bet there's an attack form too. Stop shifting forms everywhere. This is outrageous. 2 Pokémon down, yet Cynthia showed no signs of panic. She was completely locked in, long accustomed to this feeling. Speed form, not only is it fast, but its offensive output looks solid too. This thing was practically a perfect battle machine. She took a slow breath and sent out Rotom. Before she could give the command, Deoxys transformed a third time. Its muscles surged outward, its body bristled with razor-sharp spines, and it radiated explosive, concentrated power, attack form. A hyper beam fired from its mouth with terrifying speed, giving Cynthia no time to react whatsoever. Rotom didn't even get to move. It was wiped out in an instant. The damage output is insane. One-shot KO. That attack stat is absolutely terrifying. How are you supposed to fight this? 3 form switches, all kinds of counters, there's no way to play around it. 3 key team members were down in a row. The tension in the stream spiked sharply. But Cynthia wasn't rattled. Her mind was running at full throttle. Attack form hits like a truck, but its defenses must have dropped. And the form switching seems to be evaluated at the start of each turn. She scanned her remaining 3 Pokémon and her gaze settled on Pelipper and Ludicolo. If brute force wasn't working, she'd fall back on her most familiar strategy. Pelipper, let's go. The moment Pelipper took the field, rain began to fall in the middle of space impossibly, defiantly, gloriously, and somewhere in the stream, someone typed only in Pokémon. Pelipper's ability triggered. It started raining. Deoxys was locked in post-recoil stasis from using Hyper Beam and couldn't attack, giving Pelipper an opening to fire off a hurricane. But even in that frozen state, Deoxys still managed to shift into defense form before the hit landed, leaving Hurricane's damage nearly negligible. Chapter 344 The Universe's Most Powerful Virus, Time to Reap the Rewards. As the new turn began, Deoxys switched to speed form, and a thunderbolt crackled through the air, instantly knocking out Pelipper. Next up was Ludicolo. With the rain boosting it, Ludicolo's swift swim ability activated, sending its speed skyrocketing to its absolute peak. Deoxys had no way of knowing this and stayed in speed form. But under Swift Swim's effect, Ludicolo's speed was actually a hair faster than Deoxys in speed form. Now! Leaf Storm! Countless razor-sharp leaves swept out like a green tempest, slamming hard into Deoxys. In speed form, Deoxys had relatively low defense, and the hit carved through well over half its HP. It let out an agonized shriek, body swaying on the verge of collapse, but it fired back with a hyper beam that instantly knocked out Ludicolo. It's not over yet. Cynthia sent out her final Pokémon, Sceptile. The keystone had already been reclaimed. As the radiance of Mega Evolution blazed to life, Mega Sceptile took the field. At that moment, Deoxys switched back to defense form. Mega Sceptile didn't have Swift Swim. Even in its Mega form, that didn't change. Use Frenzy Plant. The most powerful grass-type move at maximum force. Countless vines erupted alongside massive, sweeping leaves. A critical hit. With a thunderous crash, Deoxys's purple body finally gave out, its HP bar hitting 0. We won. Incredible. Cynthia, you legend. That rain combo was the turning point. Almost went sideways. That Deoxys was seriously strong. The mechanics were so complex, but Cynthia's in-the-moment reading of the situation was top tier. The battle over, Cynthia let out a long, slow breath. Just then, Giratina, which had been shadowing the ship all along, suddenly let out a fierce, resonant roar. It gave Cynthia a single nod, then streaked through the sky like a meteor, hurtling straight toward the massive asteroid. The scene shifted. A grand cut scene began to play. Giratina plunged into the heart of the asteroid, unleashing its full power. Countless dark green beams shot from its body, colliding violently with the asteroid's core in a chain reaction. Boom! A thunderclap that shook the heavens. In an instant, the enormous asteroid was obliterated. Countless fragments scattered through space like fireworks, catching the light of the sun in a breathtaking display. Cynthia sat quietly before her screen, watching it all unfold. The shattered remains drifted like a meteor shower across the dark expanse of space. Something flickered in her eyes, awe, emotion, and something like relief. A memory from childhood surfaced, a legend about a hero, playing out now in this game in almost exactly the same way. This was only a game. But what she felt in that moment was completely real. That kind of power. Someday, she would reach it too. Cerulean City. Inside the villa, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows and across the living room. Kairos was lounging on the leather sofa, tablet in hand, scrolling through the morning news. After the harrowing battle the night before, the outside media still hadn't fully pieced together what had happened in the ghost world, but reports about a mysterious flash of light and spatial tremors were already flooding every channel. Most of these reports were vague, and some had clearly been suppressed by the authorities, who were labeling it all as some kind of unusual natural phenomenon. It was obvious that the League wanted to keep what had actually happened in the ghost world out of the public eye. Kairos swiped past a few headlines without much interest and closed the page. He turned his head, gaze drifting to a large transparent tank nearby. Omenet was cheerfully spinning around in the water, its tentacles occasionally brushing against the glass. It seemed to be in a pretty good mood. Compared to when it had first hatched, Omenet was noticeably larger now, the patterns on its shell sharper and more defined. It had clearly been thriving. To better care for this Pokémon from an ancient era, Kairos had spent a bit of time that morning researching its diet. The results had genuinely surprised him. The little creature liked spicy food. He had tested several different berries, and it had sniffed most of them and looked away. But one particular bright red berry, the kind that could send other Pokémon into agony from the heat, it had devoured happily, and when it was done, it blew a stream of bubbles in the water with an air of thoroughly savoring every last bite. That kind of taste was genuinely rare among Pokémon. According to the dietary guides Kairos had read, most water-type and rock-type Pokémon tended to prefer mild or high-energy foods. He shifted his gaze to another corner of the room. There, Chandelure floated quietly in midair. And Gengar was draped over the back of the sofa like a blob of purple jelly. These two ghost types sat at the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Omenet when it came to eating. In principle, as long as they had enough ghost-type energy or high-concentration spiritual power nearby, they didn't need to eat physical food the way ordinary Pokémon did, and had no real flavor preferences to speak of. As long as the energy supply was steady, they stayed in peak condition. The only reason they ate at all was that Kairos cooked out of boredom, and the food was good enough that they had simply started joining in. He let his gaze drift a little further and spotted Dragonite sitting in the corner, contentedly gnawing away at a large bucket of energy cubes. That one was straightforward, pure gluttony. Whatever was edible, it would try to eat. And its digestive system seemed to operate like a bottomless pit. The nickname Chubby had been earned fair and square. Kairos pulled his attention back and reached for something he had brought back from the reverse world, the centerpiece of his hall, the ghost-type slate. The moment he took it out, the otherwise calm living room stirred with a sudden breeze. Chandelure sensed the shift almost instantly. The flame above its head leapt upward, and deep within the pale blue fire, a trace of eerie purple flickered to life. Gengar practically launched itself off the sofa back, eyes locked onto the slate with unblinking intensity, a thin trail of drool inching toward the carpet. Kairos set the slate gently on the coffee table. A low hum resonated through the air. Rings of visible violet energy rippled outward from the slate, and both ghost types closed in immediately, drinking in the energy that radiated from it. Watching this, Kairos's regard for the slate climbed another notch. What a find! A genuinely extraordinary find. This kind of boost was nothing like the gradual gains of conventional training. It was a direct, across-the-board enhancement, more effective than even rare candy. After absorbing energy for only a short while, Chandelure's aura had already begun to shift. By Kairos's read, if Chandelure had previously been at the high end of champion tier, it had now firmly stepped across the threshold into the upper echelon of that tier, well within the strongest cohort at that level. Gengar, whose evolution had been more recent and whose strength had started slightly lower, around early champion tier, had already surged to at least mid-champion tier on the back of the slate's power. And this was just the beginning of the absorption. If they fully digested the energy stored in the slate, breaking into legendary tier would be well within reach. If other trainers on the outside ever found out how fast this worked, every single one of them would lose their minds, even someone like Steven. Speaking of legendary tier, Kairos let out a quiet sigh. The Spiritomb incident in the ghost world had ended without lasting harm, but it had been a wake-up call. This world was not nearly as peaceful as it looked on the surface. The dangers lurking in the shadows could surface at any time. And the more worlds he reached through the transit scrolls, the more complicated and dangerous things were going to get. If he kept handling situations the way he had this time, running to Giratina or Mewtwo whenever something was beyond him, that was not a sustainable strategy. Better to rely on himself. Strengthening his own capabilities had become genuinely urgent. Kairos couldn't help but think back with a wry sense of irony. When he had first arrived in this world, all he had wanted was to quietly work as a game developer. Becoming a trainer had never been part of the plan. But plans rarely survive contact with reality. If there was no avoiding it, then he would face it head-on. He needed to bring his strength up to a level where he could count on it. At least to the level of a Tier 2 divine. Fortunately, reaching that goal was not out of reach. The resources he had on hand were already quite substantial. The ghost-type slate in front of him was a major breakthrough point. If he used it properly and pushed his core team into legendary tier, his overall combat power would leap to an entirely different level. On top of that, there were the usable items waiting in the system's mission rewards, plus whatever rewards were sure to come from collecting more Sacred Beast Pokédex entries and developing the Faith system further. The path forward was already mapped out clearly enough. As long as he followed it steadily, reaching Tier 2 Divine was only a matter of time. As for right now, this particularly hectic stretch had finally come to a pause. The Ghost World crisis had been resolved. The animated series in the new world was going well. Before his next visit to that world, he had a rare window of quiet. Time to sit down and properly take stock of everything this run had brought in. Kairos settled back into the sofa, gaze resting on the floating system panel as his thoughts began to organize themselves. After last night's battle, combined with the ongoing game operations across several worlds, his emotion points had surged again. The numbers on the screen flickered a few times before settling on a figure that left him genuinely satisfied. 25,000 points. Back in the day, a number like that would have sent him into a fit of joy. It was a small fortune. Now, it still felt good, but it no longer seemed out of reach. The haul had come from many places: fear and excitement from rescue team of time players navigating tense dungeon runs, frustration and renewed determination from players in Emerald failing and starting over, and of course, the emotional reactions from audiences in the fourth world and the reverse world watching his animated series, all those conversations about where the story was going and the feelings it stirred. The rescue team side especially seemed to have reached a pivotal part of the story, and the emotional feedback from players there had been unusually intense. Beyond the emotion points, the biggest prize was clearly the ghost-type slate, no further explanation needed. On top of all that, Kairos knew his relationship with Giratina had shifted in a real way. The great dragon still wore its usual aloof and unapproachable air, but those parting words before it left had made clear it now regarded him as one of its own. That meant the next time he had something he couldn't handle on his own and went to find the ghost dragon in the reverse world, the door would be a lot easier to open. And with Will, the master of the ghost world, as a close ally, everyone in the ghost world lineage had effectively become a reliable resource. If he ever needed a rare ghost type for assistance, or wanted to make use of the ghost world's unique geography for something specific, it would all be a single conversation away. That network of relationships was worth more than any tangible item. Kairos brought his attention back to the mission panel. SS Rank Special Mission, Unrest in the Ghost World. Mission Brief: the ancient defenses of the ghost world are weakening at an alarming rate. A catastrophe brewing from deep within is on the verge of spilling over, and its influence has already begun to bleed into reality. Mission status: completed. Condition met: used the game to guide and strengthen ghost world trainers, enabling them to resist the unrest. Guided Mewtwo as an ally to defeat Spiritomb. Crisis resolved with full success. Mission rating: perfect. At the word perfect, the corners of Kairos's mouth curved upward. That was the highest rating, wasn't it? The process had its tense moments, especially when Spiritomb erupted ahead of schedule and he had to take a beat to figure out a counter, but outcomes were what mattered. Getting a perfect rating on an SS rank mission meant the rewards were going to be something worth seeing. As he tapped to confirm and claim them, 4 golden spheres of light burst forth and hovered in the air, radiating a warm, inviting glow. Kairos blinked. 4 rewards? High-tier missions usually gave 2, and that was already considered generous. 4 felt almost extravagant. Then again, this was an SS rank mission with a perfect rating. Anything less would have seemed off. He reached out and tapped open the first sphere. Congratulations, host! You have received 50,000 emotion points. Kairos's eyebrow went up. That felt good. Really, genuinely good. He had sunk over 20,000 points into rewards for the Ghost World players. At the time, he had felt a small pang of uncertainty, wondering if the investment would pay off. It had more than paid off. He had gotten it all back and then another 30,000 on top of it. A clean profit. With this 50,000 added to what he already had saved, he was sitting on real wealth now. In high spirits, Kairos opened the second sphere. The light faded. A peculiar stone materialized in his hand. Chapter 345 A special reward, back to the Ghost World. The stone was roughly the size of a palm. Its surface wasn't smooth at all, but covered in countless tiny edges and facets, like a finely cut crystal. One half was a deep, consuming black, as though it could swallow light whole. The other half was a brilliant white, radiating a gentle glow that was soft without being harsh. Black and white met in the middle of the stone, forming a strange sense of balance, as though light and shadow were endlessly cycling across its surface. Yin and yang. The shape felt oddly familiar. A moment later, the system notification popped up. Special item, Stone of Shifting Light and Shadow, SS rank. Item description, a mysterious treasure imbued with the laws of space, light, and shadow. Effect, the holder may freely alter their appearance and aura, and can even conceal their presence entirely. Even legendary class Pokémon will be unable to detect them. Additionally, the stone contains an inexhaustible reserve of light energy. In critical moments, it can instantly deploy a barrier that unconditionally blocks one attack. Cooldown, 1 day. Reading through the description, Kairos's eyes lit up. Another great find. In the past, whenever he needed to hide his identity or go somewhere he couldn't be seen openly, he'd had to tread carefully or lean on Mars Haddo for help. Mars Haddo was reliable, but had previously only been able to assist him inside the Ghost World. After everything that had happened recently, Kairos had even started thinking about having Mars Haddo travel with him full-time. Now that he had the Stone of Shifting Light and Shadow, none of that was necessary anymore. He could change his appearance whenever he wanted, vanish at will, and even if he walked right past Cynthia or someone equally sharp, they'd never pick up on him as long as he kept his distance. This would make everything a whole lot easier going forward, whether he was exploring ruins or quietly stirring up a little trouble. And on top of that, the thing could straight up save his life. A barrier that unconditionally blocked one attack was basically a get-out-of-jail-free card. Combined with the Ho-Oh feather he'd picked up earlier, which could summon a spectral projection of Ho-Oh for an offensive strike, he now had one layer of offense and one of defense, a dual safety net. Even if he ran into something truly overwhelming, he had a way out. As for the inexhaustible light energy part, Kairos held up the stone and gave it a little shake, watching the soft white glow pulse gently, and couldn't help thinking, is this thing just meant to double as an eternal light bulb? If he put it in the living room, he probably wouldn't need to replace a bulb for hundreds of years. Not the most dignified use of an SS rank treasure, but he filed the idea away anyway. That said, since it was light energy, there might be some interesting applications worth exploring down the line. It could potentially be used to charge up certain Pokémon types in specific situations. Either way, this was a flat-out excellent item. No drawbacks, nothing but upside. Satisfied, Kairos tucked the stone into his system inventory and opened the third orb of light. This time, what appeared was a strangely shaped device. It looked like a helmet fitted with several complex wires, and carried a faint air of advanced technology. Special item, EXP. Share device. Item description, when a Pokémon is equipped with this device, it will receive an amount of experience equal to that earned by every other Pokémon in the party. Note, this is not a split of the experience, but an identical copy of it. Once bound to a Pokémon, it cannot be unbound for 7 days. Kairos stared at that effect for a moment, then raised an eyebrow. Now that was something special. In Pokémon battles and training, distributing experience had always been a headache. If the main fighters were constantly on the field, the rest of the team fell behind in levels. But if he rotated everyone in and out, training took twice as long and got half the results. This device solved that problem entirely. And the key detail was that it didn't split the experience. It generated a separate, identical copy out of thin air. What did that actually mean in practice? It meant that as long as he brought his main team out for battles, every other Pokémon he had could level up in the background without his lifting a finger. That was more than double the output right there. He didn't go out of his way to grind, of course, most of his growth came naturally, but passive gains were still gains. The 7-day binding restriction was no issue at all. Kairos glanced over at Chandelure, who was hovering nearby. The little one was still absorbing energy from the ghost-type slates, and its strength was growing at a solid, steady pace. And as one of his main powerhouses, Chandelure was going to be by his side at all times going forward anyway. With a thought, Kairos bound the device directly to Chandelure. A faint flash of light passed through the air. The device vanished, dissolving into an invisible mark that briefly appeared above Chandelure's head before fading away entirely. Chandelure seemed to sense something. The flame on its head flickered, and it let out a cheerful cry in Kairos's direction, as though it could feel itself getting stronger all over again. With the third reward handled, Kairos took a slow breath and turned his attention to the last orb. This one was noticeably larger than the previous 3, its light denser and more concentrated. Whatever was inside clearly carried some weight. As the orb shattered, a metallic-looking cube materialized in his hand. Congratulations, host! You have obtained an advanced module, competition module. Kairos opened the detailed description immediately. Competition module, the host may use this module to host game competitions spanning multiple worlds. Function 1, Cross-World Expansion. The host may gather players from different worlds together for cross-server matches. Function 2, Rule Creation. The host may establish any rule set for a competition, and the system will automatically generate the corresponding code and adjustments, requiring no manual work from the host. This greatly simplifies the process of organizing events. Function 3, Absolute Oversight. The system will automatically monitor all participating players across every dimension. Should any player be found cheating, the host may choose to subject that individual to any form of consequence. Function 4, Emotion Amplification. Emotion points generated through competitions will be multiplied by 10. Kairos went quiet after reading through the functions. This module, if it were sold on its own, it'd probably run tens of thousands of points, wouldn't it? The first function, cross-world competitions, would be something nobody had ever seen before, the kind of spectacle that could send the entire player base into a frenzy. The second function handled rule generation automatically, which saved a ton of hassle. The third guaranteed anti-cheat, always the most critical concern in any game. But what really snagged Kairos's attention were those 2 words, any consequence. He frowned slightly and directed a quiet question inward. System, what exactly does any consequence mean? Like banning their account? The system's voice responded in his mind almost instantly. Responding to host, it refers to any form of consequence applied to the player themselves. This includes, but is not limited to, account suspension, revocation of game access, modification of real-world memories, and ceasing to exist. When Kairos heard ceasing to exist, he actually went blank for a second. He'd handed out ban warnings and account suspensions before. That was a long way from here. So what that meant was, the moment someone entered one of his competitions, they were essentially putting their life in his hands. If they cheated, forget getting banned. He could make them cease to exist entirely. That was more than a little unsettling. Kairos rubbed the back of his neck. But thinking about it another way, if someone simply chose not to enter his competitions, or entered and played fair, then none of this made any difference to them whatsoever. Besides, what kind of person cheats in a game? As for the last function, the 10 times emotion multiplier on points, he was already pretty used to those kinds of bonuses by now. Though competitions, when he thought about it, were one of the best possible triggers for raw emotion. The rush of winning, the sting of losing, the tension and excitement from the crowd watching it all play out. All of that converging in one place, multiplied by 10. Kairos let his imagination run with it for a moment. If the number of participants reached tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands, a single tournament could leave him absolutely swimming in emotion points. This module might not pay off immediately at his current stage, but as a long-term investment with serious returns, it was hard to beat. Looks like I'll need to put together a competition at some point when the timing is right. Kairos tapped his chin, already turning over in his mind how he might encourage players to sign up with enthusiasm. That wrapped up the full rundown of his rewards. He shook his head and cleared away the miscellaneous thoughts, then started sorting through his next priorities. Things on the Ghost World side had reached a natural stopping point. The crisis was resolved, relationships had warmed up, and there was nothing pressing to worry about there in the short term. Next up was the situation in the Second World. Based on the intel he'd gathered earlier, the strange circumstances in that world appeared to be connected to Paradox Pokémon. But the exact reason they'd shown up, as well as the current state of that world, still hadn't been pinned down. Now that the Ghost World business was wrapped up, it was time to head over there and see what was actually going on. On the gaming side of things, everything was running smoothly. Both Dark Phantom and Emerald were progressing steadily, player enthusiasm remained high, and the daily emotion points were coming in at a reliable clip. As for animation production, Kairos had long since gotten the hang of it. Putting together a full episode these days took him less than half an hour. That kind of output would have made the jaw of any animator back on Earth hit the floor. Kairos glanced at the emotion points remaining on his system panel. A little over 93,000. Add the 50,000 from the mission rewards just now, and his total was approaching 100,000. That was already a serious amount. He could easily buy several advanced modules from the shop without a second thought, and it had actually surpassed the total he'd accumulated across all worlds since he first arrived. But of course, it still wasn't enough. For now, time to spend. Kairos opened the system shop and let his gaze move across the sprawling list of items. It didn't take long before his eyes landed on one he'd had his eye on for a while. Virtual Reality Module. Listed price, 50,000 emotion points. For most people, that would be an astronomical sum. But for Kairos at this point, dropping 50,000 felt like nothing. Because this was the ultimate form of gaming, virtual reality. In this Pokémon world, while simulation battle devices of a similar nature existed, the gap between those and true virtual reality was enormous. Otherwise nobody would have ever bothered going somewhere like the Battle Road in the first place. The module's effects were extraordinary. For one, it would allow Kairos to create genuine virtual reality games. Players wouldn't stare at a screen anymore. They'd put on a special device, close their eyes, and have their consciousness step directly into the game world. In that world, everything would feel real. The sensation of wind, the temperature of water, the softness of a Pokémon's fur, even the physical impact of a move being unleashed, all of it replicated with perfect fidelity. That level of immersion was something no conventional game could ever come close to. On top of that, the emotion points generated through virtual reality games would be multiplied by 5. Kairos didn't hesitate for even a second. He hit purchase. As 50,000 emotion points were deducted, a module radiating a soft blue glow materialized on his panel. With this, his career as a game developer was about to take a serious leap forward. So, what kind of virtual reality game should he actually make? Kairos fell into thought. Dark Phantom? Emerald? Rescue Team of Time? All classics, but simply remaking them in VR felt somewhat underwhelming. Just as he was turning it over in his mind, the system chimed. New mission triggered. Mission description: the host has obtained the virtual reality module. Please create a virtual reality game centered on the theme of villain and release it in the first new world. Mission reward, to be determined based on the game's popularity among players. Time limit, 7 days. Note, the host's travel ticket will complete its cooldown tomorrow, at which point travel to the next world will be available immediately. Kairos blinked at the notification, then gave a slow nod. Well, if the system had already made the call, there was no point debating what to make. A villain theme, actually, that was a pretty interesting angle. In traditional Pokémon games, players always took the role of a righteous trainer, out to take down some shady criminal organization, Team Rocket, Team Plasma, Team Magma, and the rest. But what if the roles were flipped? What if the player took on the role of an executive, or even the boss, of one of those organizations? Building up their own faction, catching powerful Pokémon, going head-to-head with the so-called good guys. That would be a fresh and genuinely exciting experience. And with the full immersion of virtual reality, when a player was actually experiencing the world through the eyes of a villain, running those schemes firsthand, the psychological impact and emotional intensity would hit way harder than anything a conventional game could deliver. For pulling in emotion points, it would be remarkably effective. He couldn't leave for the new world until tomorrow, which gave him 7 days to build the game. Kairos ran a quick mental calculation. 7 days. More than enough. But before any of that, he still had some time left today. He glanced out the window. For now, he'd make a trip to the second world and see how things were going over there. With that settled, Kairos got to his feet. But before heading out, he needed to make one more stop in the ghost world first. There were a few things he still needed to pass along to the Pokémon over there. He also wanted to check in on Mars Haddo, specifically how the collection of faith energy was coming along. Chandelure, you're with me. Jengar, hold down the fort. Kairos recalled Chandelure to its ball, gave Dragonite a wave, then turned and walked out of the villa. Chapter 346. Back in the second world, a new situation. Half an hour later. The ghost world. It was unusually quiet here now. Gone were the wails of the ghost Pokémon that had been infected by the fog, and gone was the oppressive presence that Spiritomb had brought along with it. The entire ghost world felt as though it had been swept clean, vast, and serene. Kairos stood at the entrance to the ghost world, gazing up at the sky. The sky here was a deep, rich shade of purple, dotted with countless flickering points of light, as if the entire universe had been compressed overhead into a single breathtaking view. It was a sight that was both eerie and beautiful, carrying with it a sense of the surreal. Compared to the first time he had come here, this place felt like an entirely different world. Back then, the ghost world had been blanketed in grey, suffocating mist. The air had reeked of decay and chaos, making it hard to breathe. Now, the air was noticeably fresher. There was still a faint chill to it, but it no longer felt oppressive. I wonder how those infected ghost Pokémon are doing. After the battle had ended, most of the infected Pokémon had been taken away by the League for treatment and observation. He hoped they would all recover. They were innocent, after all, simply caught under the control of Spiritomb's strange power. While Kairos was lost in thought, a shadow on the ground nearby suddenly stirred. It moved like something coming to life, stretching and warping rapidly before a figure emerged from within. It was Will, the master of the ghost world. He looked considerably more energetic than before. His injuries had clearly largely healed, though his face still carried a trace of exhaustion. He had obviously been busy handling the aftermath. I didn't think you'd be coming back so soon. Is something the matter? Will looked a little anxious, even. No, just stopping by. Kairos gave a small nod. Will hesitated, as if carefully choosing his words, then finally couldn't help but ask, there's actually something I've been wanting to ask you. Who was that person? As he spoke, his expression shifted into something like the look of a man trying to shake off a terrifying memory. That one from before, the white one. Even just bringing it up made Will's heart stir with a kind of quiet awe. He still remembered it clearly, that white figure, standing before Spiritomb with an air of absolute dominance. In its presence, the Spiritomb that had nearly destroyed the entire ghost world had seemed as fragile and helpless as a child who knows nothing of the world. That kind of terrifying power. Kairos glanced in the direction where the battle had taken place. That one is called Mutuo. Mutuo. Will murmured the name softly, committing it firmly to memory. As for how I know it. Kairos paused. That's a bit hard to explain. I'll keep that part to myself for now. Will blinked, then quickly caught himself and didn't press further. He took a slow breath, his expression turning solemn. He bowed deeply toward Kairos. Regardless, we owe everything to you this time. If not for you, the ghost world would truly have been finished. This is a debt that those of the ghost world lineage will never forget. Will raised his head and met Kairos's eyes with a steady gaze. I'll say it again, from this day forward, if you ever need anything, whether it's the resources of the ghost world or the ghost-type trainers under our banner, say the word and we will answer without question. He meant every word of it. Kairos didn't make a show of declining. He simply nodded. No need to be so formal about it, but I hear you. Just as the two of them were talking, the air nearby suddenly rippled. A deep, dark figure slipped out from within the distortion and landed in front of Kairos. Mars Haddo. The moment it appeared, it came charging straight over Kairos. It waved its little arms and launched into a rapid-fire string of questions. Who was that white guy? He was pretty strong. I've never seen him before either. He's nowhere near Ho-Oh's level, but still not bad. Actually feels like he might even be stronger than I am. So why were you hiding from him? Don't you know him? Wasn't it you who called him here? Kairos's head was spinning by the end of it. Well, I don't actually know him that well. Oh, really? Hey. Mars Haddo turned and looked over at Will, who was standing to the side. Oh? You're here too. Will, who had been watching the whole exchange, felt the corner of his mouth twitch. So I've been standing here the entire time, said all of that, and this thing didn't even notice me? Am I invisible to you? Will let out a helpless sigh, but he was perceptive enough to recognize that these two probably had things to discuss. He took the hint gracefully. Well then, I won't keep you. There's still a great deal of restoration work here in the ghost world that needs my attention. I'll excuse myself. As he turned to leave, he cast one last glance at Mars Haddo and quietly grumbled to himself. This one's never been this enthusiastic around me. What a difference in treatment. Once Will had walked off, Kairos turned to face Mars Haddo. How is the faith energy situation looking? He asked, getting straight to the point. That was what he cared about most. Mars Haddo gave a nod, its expression growing serious. I can feel it. The faith energy has gotten noticeably denser over this past stretch of time. I honestly have no idea how you managed it. It's ridiculous. It pointed toward a certain direction in the sky. That's Ho-Oh's presence. It's faint, but I can sense it, tiny points of light converging from that direction. So it seemed that many of the rescue team players had already reached the time labyrinth and triggered Ho-Oh's assistance mechanic. Kairos turned the situation over in his mind. At this rate, Mars Haddo continued, it won't be more than a few days before I can pinpoint Ho-Oh's exact location. Kairos nodded, quietly satisfied. That was faster than he had anticipated. Getting to meet Ho-Oh would be a good thing, no doubt about it. Whether it meant drawing on Ho-Oh's power directly, or simply having Ho-Oh recharge his feather indefinitely, either way it was a win. But then a small frown crossed his face. Relying solely on the assistance mechanic within the rescue team game to accumulate faith energy was stable enough, but far too slow. After all, the number of players in that game was limited, and the story moments that could actually trigger Ho-Oh's intervention were few and far between. If he wanted to build up a massive stockpile of faith energy in a short amount of time, this method alone wasn't going to cut it. He needed a faster way. Kairos thought it over, and an idea came to him quickly. What if Ho-Oh's image were incorporated into the virtual reality game? Wouldn't that do it? Virtual reality games were all about absolute immersion and realism. If, in that world, Ho-Oh was no longer a cluster of pixels on a screen or a cutscene playing in the background, but a truly living, divine presence, if players could look up at the sky and see that brilliant, radiant sacred bird spreading its wings overhead, blotting out the light as it descended before them, the sheer visual impact would shake something deep in every single person who witnessed it. The faith energy that would pour in from that alone would come like a flood. That would be fast. Very fast. But then, Kairos glanced at the new mission that had just appeared on his system panel. The next game has to be villain-themed. That created a conflict. A legendary creature like Ho-Oh, one that symbolized hope and salvation, felt completely out of place in a game built around villainy. He couldn't exactly have players play as the bad guys trying to capture Ho-Oh, could he? Forget collecting faith energy, if Mars Haddo ever found out about that, getting an earful from it would be the least of his problems. Now, if it were Moltres, that would be a different story. Team Rocket did have a documented history with Moltres. But Ho-Oh? That felt genuinely wrong. Too bad. It's just not possible right now. Kairos let out a sigh. But it was fine. There was plenty of time. Once this villain-themed game was wrapped up, there was nothing stopping him from bringing Ho-Oh into the next one. Ho-Oh wasn't going anywhere, after all. Right, speaking of which. Kairos's gaze settled on Mars Haddo. Now that things have settled down on the ghost world side, are you planning to keep staying here? Mars Haddo had originally turned up here because Ho-Oh had told it to keep an eye on Spiritomb. Now that Spiritomb had been dealt with by Mutuo, and the ghost world was largely empty of both people and Pokémon, the place felt hollow. Faced with the question, Mars Haddo was visibly caught off guard. It seemed like it had never really thought about it before. This person and all his things going on. Kairos shrugged. In that case, what do you say about coming along with me? Having Mars Hatto by his side would serve two purposes. On one hand, it meant having a mythical Pokémon's combat strength at his disposal, on the other, he'd always be in the loop on Ho-Oh's situation. Come along with you, hey. Mars Hatto blinked. I'll have to think about it. Kairos nodded. No rush. I've got somewhere to be first. We'll talk when I get back. Where are you off to now? Kairos turned and activated the transit scroll. The familiar wave of dizziness washed over him and faded just as quickly. When he opened his eyes again, the League's sleek, tech-lined streets were gone, replaced by the familiar noise and faint smell of machine oil that hung in the air of the lower district. This time, though, something was different. The usual sense of decay and suffocation had lifted. In its place was an energy that was hard to name but unmistakably alive. He stood at the mouth of a secluded alley, got his bearings, and stepped out. The scene in front of him gave him pause. Was this really the grim, crumbling lower district he remembered? The streets, once narrow and filthy, were noticeably wider and cleaner now. Patches and repairs were still visible here and there, but the mountains of refuse that had once piled everywhere were completely gone, replaced by neat rows of street lamps and buildings still under construction. People moved all around him, busy and purposeful, none of that hollow, glazed look he had seen before. Everyone seemed to carry something lighter in their expression. Even the walls were different, the chaotic graffiti had been scrubbed away and replaced with vivid, colorful artwork, all of it featuring cheerful Pokémon designs, and not just any Pokémon, but ones from the Hone region that had never existed in this world. It seemed that in the time he'd been away, the changes here had exceeded anything he had expected. Kairos didn't linger. He remembered where the Watcher's base was. He picked up his pace and headed in that direction. Along the way, he noticed even more changes that surprised him. Many of the derelict, abandoned buildings had been converted into temporary shelters or supply distribution points. He could even spot people in matching uniforms keeping order in the streets, though the uniforms weren't the rigid military gear of the League, they looked more like the attire of a civilian defense organization. Before long, the familiar gate of the Watcher's base came into view. Though familiar was almost the wrong word now. It had been completely transformed. The rust-pocked iron doors had been replaced with heavy alloy gates fitted with what looked like advanced security systems. The perimeter walls had been raised and reinforced, and warning lines had been strung up along the outer edge. Several fully armed guards stood at the entrance, their eyes sweeping the area with alert precision. But the moment their gaze landed on Kairos, that vigilance dissolved instantly into stunned, barely contained excitement. Is that Mr. Kairos? One of the guards seemed to recognize him and nearly lost his composure, his voice pitching upward as he grabbed his radio. Quickly! Alert the president! Mr. Kairos is back! Mr. Kairos is actually back! The gates swung open with a deep rumble, and several guards practically ushered him inside. The moment he stepped through, the energy hit him head-on. The open courtyard that had once been bare and sparse was now dotted with temporary structures, filled with people in constant motion, some hauling supplies, some calibrating equipment, and a few Pokémon in noticeably excellent condition lending a hand nearby. Before he had time to take it all in properly, the sound of quick, purposeful footsteps came from the direction of the main building. A handful of familiar faces walked toward him at a brisk pace. Old Heart came forward first, stopped in front of Kairos, and stood there for a moment looking lost for words. Ilara's eyes were shining, a smile on her face. Alicia was dressed in neat administrative attire, her manner still composed and cool, though those ice blue eyes of hers held something that hadn't been there before, a quiet, lingering concern. And there was Alan, who had clearly grown taller, and who immediately launched himself at Kairos without any preamble. Bro! You're back! Good to see everyone's doing well. Kairos ruffled Alan's hair and greeted them all. Doing well? Better than we've ever been. Old Heart seemed to finally come back to himself. You disappear for that long and you finally decide to come back, hey? Ilara smiled. Back is all that matters. You're back, Kairos. You've gotten a little thinner, a little darker too, but you look well. That's what counts. Alicia stepped forward, gave a slight incline of her head, and spoke with unmistakable respect in her voice. Welcome back, Mr. Kairos. We owe you more than we can say. Kairos waved it off and let his gaze move over everyone before settling on Alicia. From the look of things, you've got a full grip on the situation. Alicia nodded, her expression turning measured and deliberate. Yes. After you left, everything changed dramatically. With gouging fire's backing, the factions that had been watching and waiting, or even looking for ways to push back, fell into line quickly. I'm no longer the figurehead president I was before. I have real authority now. That's good. Kairos didn't seem particularly surprised. Chapter 347 Reunion with Gouging Fire, and a broken down Miraidon? In this world, with a legendary Pokémon like Gouging Fire standing guard, nobody dared to step out of line. It's not just the political changes, either, Alicia continued, her voice carrying a hint of excitement she couldn't quite hide. Ever since the game you left behind spread across the underground, the rate at which people have been getting stronger could only be described as insane. Everyone's been racking up all kinds of rewards through the game. Trainers have seen massive jumps in strength, and those strange Pokémon that used to give us nightmares are barely a threat anymore. Oh? You've dealt with all of them? Kairos raised an eyebrow. Most of the ones that showed up underground have already been cleared out or chased off, Alicia replied. And now, a lot of people have started pushing into the surface world, even setting up outposts. A solid chunk of our resources down in the lower districts these days come from up top, fresh produce, clean water, even some rare minerals we used to think were just myths. Kairos thought it over, then asked, if the surface is already safe and resources are this plentiful, why not just move up there for good? Staying underground forever isn't exactly a long-term solution. Ilera, standing beside him, let out a sigh and picked up where Alicia left off. We'd love to, but the sheer scale of it is just overwhelming. The underground city is home to so many people. Moving everyone to the surface would mean building an enormous amount of housing from scratch, not to mention figuring out defense, power infrastructure, and everything else. That's not something you pull off in a couple of days. The plan right now is to keep living underground as a temporary measure and gradually shift the population upward. Once the surface infrastructure is properly built out, people will make the move naturally. That sounds like the right call, Kairos said with a nod. Ilera looked at him, her eyes full of something quiet and sincere. Honestly, everything we have now, we owe to you. Not just the game, but all the groundwork you laid before you left. The old government institutions have basically fallen apart at this point. Those corrupt officials who were only ever in it for themselves have either run off or been hauled in. We've brought in a new wave of people who actually care about this community, and the underground world right now, you could say it's finally thriving. People have something to look forward to again. Old Heart grinned from the side. That's right. I could tell this one was something special the moment I laid eyes on him. See? My gut never lies. He seemed a lot livelier these days. Everyone laughed, and the room felt lighter for it. Ilera gave Kairos a warm pat on the shoulder. Now that you're back, this calls for a real celebration. I've already put the word out. We're throwing you a big welcome back party. Kairos shook his head, though he didn't say no. Fine by me. Before any of that, though, there are a few things I need to take care of first. What kind of things? Just name it. If it's within our power, it's as good as done. Old Heart declared, thumping his chest. Nothing too complicated. I just want to check in on Gouging Fire first. Where is she right now? Alicia paused, then answered, Gouging Fire, she doesn't like being underground. She spends most of her time on the surface, somewhere around that volcano from before. She patrols other areas occasionally, too. Got it. I'll go find her. Kairos nodded and turned to head out. Let me send someone with you. Alicia started. No need. I'll go on my own. I'll be back soon. Kairos waved her off. With his current strength, plus Chandelure at his side, he could handle just about anything this world threw at him. The last thing he needed was a babysitter. Nobody pushed it, and they watched him go. Kairos left the base, made his way back through the lower districts, and reached the elevator that led up to the surface. It was well maintained, running smoothly and fast, and before long he was standing once again in the open air. He drew a slow breath of cool air carrying the scent of earth and grass, and felt the sharpness return to his senses. He set off toward the volcano. Along the way, he noticed with a keen eye that the surrounding environment had quietly but clearly changed. The Paradox Pokémon that had once been everywhere, their bodies gleaming with a cold metallic sheen, were gone, every last one of them. The whole world felt different somehow, cleaner, more at ease. The ancient Pokémon, on the other hand, were appearing with noticeably greater frequency. When Kairos passed near them, they'd glance up briefly and then go back to what they were doing, unbothered by his presence, clearly having grown used to people moving through the surface world by now. The whole picture put him in a decent mood. Before long, the massive volcano came back into view. Even before he got close, a familiar wave of immense pressure rolled toward him from that direction. But there was no hostility in it. If anything, it carried a faint, understated note of welcome. Kairos picked up his pace and climbed to the rim of the volcano. Sure enough, that enormous and imposing figure was still coiled on the great stone at the center of the lava, right where it had always been. Gouging Fire had apparently sensed his approach well in advance. That massive head tilted slightly, golden pupils settling on him, and she let out a deep, resonant rumble that sounded like a greeting. Kairos stood at the edge of the crater and, through their mythic resonance, reached out with his thoughts. Long time no see. How've things been? Gouging Fire let out a low growl, and what came back through the resonance was a sense of calm and quiet satisfaction. She conveyed that things were peaceful here, that all those irritating hunks of metal were gone, and that the world felt right to her now. Good to hear. Kairos nodded, feeling something loosen in his chest. He paused, then continued, what about the ancient Pokémon? Are they getting along with the humans? Any trouble? Gouging Fire shook her head. None at all. She had apparently kept the ancient Pokémon in check to some degree, warning them against making any rash moves against humans, while the humans had also wised up and stopped picking fights. The two sides were holding a careful balance. Sounds like you've been keeping busy while I was gone. Kairos smiled. Gouging Fire lifted her head with a quiet air of pride, golden mane rippling in the rising heat. Kairos studied her, his expression turning more serious. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Do you have any other friends at your level? He meant Walking Wake and Raging Bolt, of course. This trip back to the second world had more than one purpose. Beyond sorting out matters related to the game, there was something else he needed to deal with. Ever since his run-ins with Mewtwo and Giratina in the main world, the progress bar on his system's legendary Pokédex had reached a critical point, sitting just one entry short of unlocking the first collection reward. He couldn't see what the reward actually was yet, but whatever it was, one more entry would unlock it. And the first names that came to mind were Walking Wake and Raging Bolt, legendary Pokémon from the same era as Gouging Fire. Finding even one of them would fill that last gap in the Pokédex. Gouging Fire, however, went quiet at the question. Then that great head slowly moved from side to side. What came through the resonance carried a faint trace of regret and resignation. Those two hadn't come with her to this world. They seemed to have stayed behind and never to have made the crossing. Kairos couldn't help feeling a sting of disappointment. That was going to complicate things. Where was he supposed to find another legendary Pokémon? The next world? The way things had been going, there was no guarantee the next world would have any Pokémon in it at all. But just as he was turning the problem over in his mind, another impression came through from Gouging Fire. She indicated that while those two weren't around, if he was interested in something at that level, there was actually one more. The catch was that this particular one was in a very unusual state and quite different from herself. Oh? Unusual how? Kairos's curiosity sharpened immediately. He fixed his gaze on Gouging Fire. How unusual? And where? Gouging Fire didn't explain directly. Instead, she tilted her head in a particular direction, signaling for him to follow. With that, she rose from her resting place, her enormous body unfolding as she spread her wings. But she didn't take flight. Instead, she set off on slow, heavy strides, heading down a hidden path along the far side of the volcano. Kairos followed right away, with Chandelure drifting silently along behind him. They pushed through a rugged stretch of mountain trail, skirted the crater, and moved deeper into the mountain range. As they went further in, the temperature began to drop. The scorching air turned cool, then cold, eventually carrying a sharp bite of frost. The vegetation shifted from heat-resistant shrubs to stands of conifers, then disappeared entirely, replaced by an expanse of ice fields blanketed in pristine white snow. The temperature kept falling. Before long, what opened up ahead of him brought Kairos to a sudden, surprised stop. An ice crystal terrain, sitting right in the middle of a volcanic range. The landscape had completely transformed. The black volcanic rock had given way to translucent blue ice crystals, and the air carried a bone-deep chill that stood in total contrast to the intense heat they'd just left behind. Throughout this crystalline expanse, strange light shimmered and flickered in every direction. Looking more closely, Kairos realized the area was packed with rare minerals. Several of them pulsed with a faint but unmistakable energy, a clear sign of exceptional quality. Something clicked in Kairos's mind, and he quietly made a note of the location. He'd have to bring people here to mine it at some point. These resources would be a serious boon to the underground world in its current state. Gouging fire paid no attention to the cold around her. The flames wreathing her body burned even hotter than usual, pushing the chill back. She led Kairos deeper in until they finally reached the central area of the ice crystal zone. It was a vast, sunken basin, buried under thick layers of snow and ice. At first glance, it looked completely unremarkable. Gouging fire stopped and turned to face Kairos with a low rumble, as if to say, "Here." Kairos stared at the snow-covered ground, puzzled. "Here? What exactly is here?" Rather than answering, Gouging fire opened her mouth and unleashed a torrent of blazing fire across the expanse of snow. The burst of crimson flame swallowed the snow instantly, and a sharp, sizzling hiss filled the air as the snow vaporized in massive quantities. Clouds of steam billowed upward, blocking the view in every direction. Kairos narrowed his eyes. Through the rising steam, he could just make out the faint outline of something emerging beneath the surface. As the fire kept coming, the last of the snow burned away, revealing what lay underneath in full. When Kairos finally made out the complete shape of what was in front of him, his eyes went wide and the surprise on his face was impossible to hide. It was a massive mechanical construct, shaped unmistakably like a living creature. Kairos stared at the colossal mechanical form, his gaze tracing the sleek, aerodynamic body with its distinctly technological design for a long moment. The burst of flame had fully dissipated into steam, and with the snow cleared away, the thing's true appearance was laid bare before him. It was a dragon-shaped Pokémon, its frame built from interlocking plates of white and cyan metal, limbs precisely jointed, and at its neck a circular device clearly some kind of energy core hung motionless in the air. At the moment, though, that device was dark and lifeless. The entire body was coated in the dust of ages and a thin layer of frost, lying motionless as if it were nothing more than a sculpture that had long since gone cold. "This is Myra-Iden." Kairos identified it immediately. This was unmistakably a legendary Pokémon. But his brow furrowed almost right away. By faction, this one belonged squarely in the same camp as Iron Jugulies, Iron Valiants, and all the others of that iron-clad, future paradox lineage that had been tearing through the world, radiating chaos everywhere they went. So why had Gouging Fire said it was like herself? Kairos turned to look at Gouging Fire beside him, his expression openly questioning. Gouging Fire seemed to read the confusion on his face. She gave a low growl, her massive frame dipping slightly, and the impression that came through the mythic resonance was unusually clear. She explained that even though this one looked a lot like those iron-clad creatures that had crawled through the space-time rifts, it carried none of that repulsive, frenzied drive to erode and consume everything around it. On the contrary, the feeling it gave off was closer to that of something native to this world, or perhaps a weapon created specifically to fight against that force, one that had simply burned through all of its energy fighting that battle and collapsed into a long, deep sleep. Kairos listened carefully and nodded, turning it over in his mind. He reached out a hand and lightly touched the cold metallic surface of Myriden's outer shell. The sensation at his fingertips was hard and smooth, completely without warmth, and utterly without any sign of life. It had fully and completely shut down. "Legendary Pokédex," he murmured inwardly. A translucent light panel materialized before him and swept rapidly over Myriden's body. What caught him off guard, though, was that the legendary Pokédex progress bar on the system interface didn't react at all. There wasn't even a prompt saying the subject was unregistered. That was almost funny. A legendary tier Pokémon was sitting right in front of him, and the Pokédex wouldn't even acknowledge it. Kairos blinked, then worked it out. It was probably because Myra-Iden was completely shut down and dormant, which likely meant it no longer registered as a functioning legendary Pokémon. The Pokédex simply didn't recognize it. "Well, that's a problem," he muttered, pressing his fingers to his temple as a mild headache set in. He had thought he'd lucked into exactly what he needed, something that would slot in the final piece of the legendary Pokédex puzzle and score him a reward in the process. Turned out he was going to have to play repairman first. And this was cutting-edge machinery at that, technology from the future, no less. If it was broken, where was he supposed to find replacement parts? Still, now that he'd found it, there was no way he was leaving it here. Chapter 348 Capturing Myra Iden, and a brand new gift. Kairos reached down to his waist and pulled out an empty Ultra Ball, holding it up in front of Myra Iden with a casual wave. Ding! The Ultra Ball snapped open, and a beam of red light washed over the massive mechanical body. There was no resistance at all. Myra Iden dissolved into a streak of light and was pulled cleanly into the ball. It rocked once, then went still in the palm of Kairos's hand. Well, at least it could be caught. I'll bring it back and figure out the rest later. Kairos pocketed the ball without any particular urgency. The thing had been buried in the underground world for who knew how long, without falling apart. As long as he could track down a power source or some way to fix it, getting it running again was just a matter of time. And this was Myra Iden, of all things. Who turns down an electric motorcycle? If he actually got it working, not only would another slot light up on his legendary Pokédex, but he would have one more ride to add to his collection. Any way you sliced it, this was a win. With Myra Iden taken care of, Kairos turned back to Gouging Fire. Hey, Gouging Fire, what's the situation on the surface been like lately? Still dealing with the iron Pokémon? Since Gouging Fire had been holding things down here the whole time, it would have the clearest picture of what was going on up above. Gouging Fire flicked its tail, a relaxed calm flowing through its psychic communication. Roar! It relayed that iron Pokémon appearances had been tapering off steadily. The occasional one still slipped through, but none of them were much of a threat anymore. There was one strange thing, though. The iron Pokémon that did show up seemed to have gotten noticeably stronger than before. On paper, that should have been a problem. But the trainers on the surface were outpacing them. The moment an iron Pokémon showed its face, packs of trainers would converge on it and drive it back in short order. They worked together well, their Pokémon were varied and powerful, and some had even started teaming up with the ancient Pokémon native to the surface world. The iron Pokémon didn't know what to do with any of it. Kairos nodded along as he listened. So the resources he had funneled into the game had paid off even better than he'd expected. All those rare items, DMS, and stat-boosting supplements he had pushed through had translated directly into real-world fighting ability. The trainers, once completely overmatched in this world, had clawed their way back and turned things around entirely. It had been worth it after all. He was still thinking about it when Gouging Fire suddenly leaned in close, its enormous head nearly pressing into Kairos's face. A flicker of eagerness lit up those golden eyes. It asked through their psychic link, "Hey, that game, Emerald, are there more after it?" Kairos blinked, then pulled up his interface to check Gouging Fire's progress. He hadn't expected it to get this into it. It had already cleared 5 gyms. Apparently even a legendary Pokémon wasn't immune to a good game. Of course there are, Kairos said with a nod. He swept a hand through the air and pulled up the system backend. Since you're into it, let me point you toward something a little different. He browsed through the options as he talked. This one's called Rescue Team. Gouging Fire tilted its head, a note of confusion coming through its psychic tone. Rescue Team? What's that? In this one, Kairos explained, you don't play as a trainer. You play as a Pokémon. You can pick a Charmander, a Bulbasaur, even an Oddish if you want. Then you put together a rescue team, take on requests from other Pokémon, explore dungeons and help whoever's gotten themselves into trouble. Gouging Fire's eyes visibly brightened at that. No trainer. Just an ordinary Pokémon. That sounded like something completely different. It was used to looking down on the world from a position of overwhelming power. That feeling had its own satisfaction, sure, but the idea of experiencing life as a regular Pokémon for once, actually knowing what it felt like to be small and vulnerable, had a strange, unexpected pull to it. Give it a shot. I think you'll like it, Kairos said. He raised his hand, swept it forward, and a massive game panel materialized right in front of Gouging Fire, already loaded up with Rescue Team of Time. Gouging Fire reached out a claw without a second's hesitation and tapped the screen. A cheerful, upbeat title theme rang out, and the game began. Watching Gouging Fire throw itself into the game immediately, groaning over which starter to choose, Kairos couldn't help shaking his head. Not a scrap of legendary Pokémon dignity left. It was basically just a gigantic, overpowered gamer with a dependency. Alright, have fun. I'm heading out. He didn't bother interrupting it, just called out a quick goodbye and turned to leave. Gouging Fire gave a lazy wave of its tail in response, eyes glued to the screen. Kairos left the volcanic region and made his way back toward the lower district. His mood was noticeably lighter than when he'd come down here. Myra Iden was in his pocket. The threat on the surface had mostly been dealt with. And the underground world was growing faster than he had ever hoped for. Everything was moving in the right direction. By the time he got back to the lower district, the sky had gone dim. But the night here was nothing like the dead quiet of the old days. The streets were bright and full of life. The moment he walked through the base gates, he stopped in his tracks. The normally open plaza was packed from edge to edge. A massive crowd stretched as far as he could see, everyone waving glowing light sticks or holding up signs that read things like "Welcome back, Kairos and the God of Gaming." The instant people spotted him, the whole plaza exploded. Kairos! Kairos! Kairos is back! The noise hit like a wall, loud enough to rattle the ceiling. Kairos hesitated for half a second, his instinct pulling him a step back. Being stared at and cheered by tens of thousands of people at once was, for someone who preferred to stay under the radar, a bit much. He genuinely had no idea what to do with himself. Before he could even get his bearings, Alicia, Hart, and the others came pushing through the crowd toward him, all grinning widely, steering him toward the large ceremonial stage that had been set up in the middle of the plaza. "Not bad, right? Caught you off guard." Hart leaned in with a smug look. "The people put this whole thing together themselves. We couldn't have stopped them if we tried." Kairos let out a quiet, dry laugh. "Yeah. Definitely didn't see that coming." He still wasn't used to being looked at like this. He was guided up onto the stage. Standing at the top and looking out at the sea of faces below, every one of them glowing with excitement and something resembling awe, Kairos brought his hands together. The music faded down. The cheering settled into an expectant hush. A young man who had stepped up as MC moved forward, gripping a microphone with barely contained energy. "And now, let's give the biggest welcome we've got to our hero, the man who gave us hope when we had none, Mr. Kairos, to say a few words." The applause surged again. Kairos took the microphone. He barely got out a simple "Hey, everyone" before the crowd below buried it under another wave of noise. It took a solid few minutes before things settled down enough to continue. He looked out at all those eager faces, and something quiet settled in his chest. These people had lived in fear and darkness for a long time. His game had given them something to work toward, a way to get stronger, and a reason to actually enjoy being alive. "I haven't really done all that much," Kairos's voice carried across the plaza through the speakers. "Everything you have now is something you built for yourselves. I just gave a small nudge along the way." Someone in the crowd immediately called back, "Mr. Kairos is way too modest. That game was the best thing that ever happened to us." Then a louder voice cut through the noise, "Mr. Kairos. Can I ask you something?" Kairos nodded. "Go ahead." A young man jumped to his feet, practically buzzing with excitement. "Do the Pokémon in the game actually exist? Will we ever get to see them for real?" The question landed and the whole plaza went quiet. Every person held their breath, waiting. For people who had grown up underground, the vivid, wild Pokémon from the game, creatures with incredible abilities and forms straight out of a dream, had always felt beautiful but somehow out of reach. Every Pokémon they had ever actually seen in their lives was normal type or steel type. The ones from the game were something else entirely, almost like mythology. Kairos looked out at them. They absolutely exist. Not just the ones you've seen in the game, either. There are far more Pokémon in this world than you can imagine, and they're more amazing than anything I could describe. They live in forests, in oceans, up in the open sky, on top of volcanoes and glaciers. Some can breathe fire. Some can call down storms. Some can bend time and space itself. The crowd stared in stunned silence, something like longing spreading across every face. That many different kinds. I always figured it was just normal and steel. If I could just see one of them someday. Listening to the quiet murmurs drifting up from the crowd, something clicked in Kairos's mind and the corner of his mouth pulled up. He had prepared exactly the right thing for this moment. "I know how much you all want to see them," Kairos said, letting a hint of mystery creep into his voice. "But before that, I want to give everyone something. Something that'll let you experience the world of Pokémon like you never have before." He snapped his fingers. Snap! The sharp sound echoed across the plaza. At that moment, the enormous screen behind him, the one normally used for announcements, flickered once. Then, from speakers ringing the plaza on all sides, a bold, driving, undeniably catchy piece of music burst into the air. I wanna be the very best. With that iconic opening line, the screen blazed to life, showing the familiar image of a boy in a red and white cap, and right beside him, that unmistakable yellow mouse, Pikachu. The anime had started. It was the very first episode of the Indigo League, with the proper opening theme that Kairos had made sure to include. "Sit back and enjoy," he said. With every pair of eyes fixed on the screen, the episode began to play. At first, scattered murmurs moved through the crowd. But as the episode went on, the voices dropped away one by one, and the entire plaza was pulled in. On screen, Pikachu darted across a grassy field, sparks crackling from its cheeks, while Ash threw himself in front of a flock of Spearow to protect it. Every frame hit like something new. Tens of thousands of people went completely silent, eyes locked onto the screen, barely blinking. The kids especially sat with their mouths hanging open, eyes lit up in a way they had never been before. "That's Pikachu, it can actually use electricity. That Ash, he's got guts." Watching the crowd below lose themselves completely in what they were seeing, Kairos gave a small, satisfied nod. "Good. That should keep the points coming in nicely." But while the lower district was wrapped up in wonder, far away on the surface, something quiet and dark had begun to move. Without any warning, a patch of space buckled and twisted. A circular vortex spread open in an isolated valley, its edges crackling with unstable arcs of dark purple electricity, widening like a drop of ink bleeding through water. Its interior was pitch black, a passage to somewhere unknown, giving off a coldness that made the air feel wrong. A flash of light, and a figure stepped through, landing lightly on the ground. A man. Tall, composed, dressed in a fitted white uniform trimmed with gold thread and marked with strange geometric patterns, somewhere between regal and technological. The green-haired man who had been here once before. The moment he steadied himself, the easy smile on his face went stiff. He swept his gaze across his surroundings, his expression tightening with every second, the smile draining away entirely and giving way to open confusion. Something was off. He couldn't name it at first. Then it hit him: everything looked too alive. Lush, healthy trees. Wild flowers in bloom. Grass swaying gently in a soft breeze. The air smelled like clean earth and green things. No metallic dust drifting through the sky. No warped structures scattered across the landscape. This was nothing like a world in the middle of being taken over. "That's strange," he murmured to himself, genuinely puzzled. Why has the spread slowed down since last time? He remembered it clearly. When he had been here before, the corruption hadn't been moving fast, but it had been moving. There should have been visible signs of it in the surrounding area by now. But there was nothing. If anything, this place seemed more alive than it had been before. It was almost as if the world was recovering. What exactly happened here? The green-haired man frowned. He raised a hand. From the shadows nearby, a large iron hand stepped forward, its body gleaming with cold metallic light, its electronic eyes glowing a deep crimson, clearly pushed well beyond a standard specimen. "Let's take a look around," he said. Chapter 349: The Rainbow Rocket Fortress, Indigo League. He didn't actually send Iron Hands to search for anything. Instead, he took out that black stone edged with strange blue markings once more. He closed his eyes and channeled his thoughts into it. A beam of light fell directly onto Iron Hands. He waited for a long moment. Then his eyes snapped open. This time, his face wasn't just confused. It was edged with shock and bewilderment. How is this possible? He stared at the images the stone fed back to him and couldn't help but draw a sharp breath. The feed showed several of the future Paradox Pokémon he had previously powered up, launching an assault on the entrance to some underground city. By his calculations, those enhanced specimens should have torn through the locals' defenses with ease and delivered a devastating blow. Yet what the feed showed was the exact opposite. Those future Paradox Pokémon had been obliterated. Completely obliterated. In the images, a group of human trainers in matching uniforms, working alongside several powerful ancient Paradox Pokémon, had beaten his enhanced future Paradox Pokémon into utter helplessness. Their strength was incomparably greater than anything he had observed during his last reconnaissance. And their coordination was flawless, as though they had drilled together countless times. What made his scalp prickle most of all was the sight of those ancient Paradox Pokémon working in seamless tandem with the humans, showing none of the wildness or aggression that they were supposed to possess. How did the locals of this world suddenly become so strong? The green-haired man felt his understanding of the situation crumbling beneath him. Was this still the same fragile world that was supposed to be theirs for the taking? What on earth had happened in such a short span of time? Had the attacks drawn out some hidden potential in these locals? No. Impossible. Potential wasn't something that could be awakened overnight. This kind of rapid power growth looked more like the result of some external force lending its aid. The green-haired man fell silent for a moment, his gaze darkening. He stared at the stone in his hand, jaw tight. No. This has to be reported immediately. At this rate, forget corroding this world. We might not even be able to maintain the existing ultra-wormhole channels. There's no way we can complete the corrosion miss. He took a slow, steadying breath and stopped hesitating. With a wave of his hand, the ultra-wormhole that had yet to close reappeared before him. The swirling purple-black vortex rotated slowly, radiating an enticing pulse of spatial energy. He left iron hands behind, turned, and stepped into the ultra-wormhole without a second thought. The vortex contracted and rippled behind him, then vanished completely, leaving the valley as still and quiet as ever, as though nothing had happened at all. The scene shifted. Out in the deep, boundless expanse of space. No stars shone here. There was only endless darkness and the faint, distant glow of nebulae. In this dead silence, an enormous starship fortress hung suspended in the void, a structure of almost unimaginable scale. It dwarfed the vessel that had appeared above Yanxi's city. The hull stretched for dozens of kilometers, its surface clad in heavy silver-grey armor plating, bristling with countless cannon muzzles and energy emitters that radiated an overpowering sense of annihilation. Had Cynthia or Lance been present, they would have recognized it in an instant. This was the very starship from the games, the Rainbow Rocket Mobile Fortress. At the very apex of the hull, a massive emblem glowed with a steady blue light, the letter P standing out against the void with cold, imperious authority. Inside the starship, the green-haired man materialized in an opulent chamber. He straightened his slightly disheveled collar. The shock and turmoil that had overtaken him on the surface were gone entirely from his expression, replaced by his usual composure and cool detachment, as though none of it had ever happened. He left the room and walked through corridor after corridor of sleek, high-tech metal passageways, passing busy staff hurrying in both directions and alert lights blinking red on the walls. Before long, he arrived at a vast command hall. The atmosphere inside was solemn and tense. Enormous display screens hung suspended throughout the space, streaming complex data feeds and live footage. Each screen corresponded to a different world. Uniformed personnel moved constantly between them, checking conditions and reporting into their comms. Report, World 345, corrosion at 80%. Local civilization's defensive line has collapsed. Ready to activate Ultra Wormhole for troop deployment. Report, World 112, corrosion progressing slowly but within normal parameters. Estimated 18 days until completion. Recommend continued deployment of Paradox Pokémon for harassment. Report, World 66, high energy signature detected. Suspected legendary Pokémon presence. Executor dispatched for retrieval. The green-haired man walked through it all without a flicker of reaction on his face. These were routine operations. Most worlds were progressing according to plan. But what he had to report today was an exception. He walked directly to a screen in the corner of the hall and pressed a sequence of buttons on the console before it. The display flickered and brought up a red progress bar. Unlike the others, this one wasn't advancing. It was slowly sliding backward, with a prominent warning indicator beside it. World 7. Corrosion progress showing anomalous regression. Rate of local power growth is abnormal. Uncontrollable factors have emerged. He spoke into his COMM unit, his voice steady and measured. Requesting executor-level forced intervention. His words echoed through the hall, drawing the attention of several senior officers. One of the figures seated on the elevated platform turned to face him, a man wearing a mask that concealed his features entirely, though the eyes visible above it gleamed with a bone-chilling intensity. Executor-level forced intervention. The masked man's voice was low and rough, carrying a note of scrutiny. Clouded Leopard. Are you certain it's necessary to call in that level of force? The green-haired man, addressed by the codename Clouded Leopard, gave a slight bow and replied respectfully, "Yes, sir. The rate at which the locals in that world are growing stronger is far beyond what is normal. Standard Paradox Pokémon are no longer sufficient to suppress them. If we don't intervene promptly, all our previous efforts will have been wasted." Furthermore, he paused briefly before continuing. While I was in that world, I sensed an unusual disturbance, as though some kind of force we have yet to account for is influencing its development. The masked man was quiet for a moment, fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. An unusual force. Very well. Request approved. However, remember, once an executor is deployed, the operation will be highly visible. Do not draw the attention of other factions. Especially those. He let out a quiet, dismissive sound. Understood, Clouded Leopard replied. With the masked man's approval given, the display shifted again. The scene jumped to a corner of the fortress, a vast chamber encased entirely in thick layers of energy shielding. At the center of the room stood an enormous black apparatus, altar-like in its construction. Above it, suspended in the air, floated a pitch-black orb. The surface of the pokeball crackled ceaselessly with purple-black lightning, filling the air with a constant electric hiss. A terrifying, malevolent presence radiated steadily from within, warping the air around it. Then, without warning, a pair of crimson eyes snapped open in the shadows behind the orb. Those eyes held no pupils, only boundless savagery and an insatiable hunger for destruction, like two flames burning with spectral fury. Boom! A black shockwave detonated outward from the figure at its center, slamming into the surrounding energy shielding and sending violent ripples cascading across its surface. The figure emerged fully into view. The guardian of the sea, Logia. But its condition was clearly very wrong, its appearance most of all. Its body was no longer the sacred silver white it was known for. It had become a deep, consuming blackness. Its feathers, once smooth, had turned sharp and jagged, every last one of them forged, it seemed, from dark steel, gleaming with a cold light. 10 blade-like spines jutted from its abdomen, like inverted daggers, radiating a presence that sent a chill straight to the bones. It looked like a living weapon, something transformed, something saturated with fury and the desire to destroy. It slowly spread its wings. The vast span of them blotted out the light and plunged the entire room into shadow. Before it, the great black apparatus began to roar to life, its countless complex runes blazing alight. A massive portal, pulsing with violent violet light, began to coalesce and take shape in front of the dark Logia. Clouded Leopard stood behind an observation window above, watching it all unfold with something like surprise crossing his face. They actually deployed this one. That's generous. Then again, that world does have quite a lot of resources. With this, it should all be settled, shouldn't it? As the portal locked fully into form, Logia fixed its crimson eyes on the world waiting beyond the gate. It surged forward, wings crashing down a streak of black lightning carrying the force of absolute annihilation and plunged headlong through the portal. At that same moment, in the second world, the lights came up in a streaming studio. Dan the Demon King reclined in his chair as always, facing the camera with barely contained excitement. Good evening everyone, welcome back. I won't waste time on small talk today. Let's get straight into it, Pokémon, Episode 4. He pressed play. The barrage of gift animations and scrolling comments that had been flooding the stream instantly calmed, and every viewer's attention locked onto the large screen before him. It's here. Finally. I've been waiting for this. I get restless the moment I miss a minute of this. I'm climbing the walls. Anyone else? Props to the streamer. We just watched episode 3 yesterday and he's already got episode 4 ready to go. Same. This show is addictive. I literally cannot stop watching. Hurry up. Play it. The screen flickered, and the darkness gave way to a sudden burst of light. This time, however, Ash's face didn't appear right away. Instead, a rousing, high-energy piece of music exploded into the room. Boom. 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 The driving drumbeat hit like a fist against the chest of every viewer. Then, a vibrant male voice rang out. My goal is to be a Pokémon master. I've caught a Pokémon. To those iconic lyrics, the footage cut rapidly through a flurry of images. Colorful gym badges flashed by. Then came Pokémon no one had ever seen before. A massive black and yellow bee, the 3 venomous stingers at its tail glinting coldly as its wings beat at a high frequency with a deep drone, weaving at blinding speed through jungle undergrowth. A large, pink, black and white cow Pokémon grazing contentedly in a field. A brown, tree-shaped Pokémon with several coconut-like eggs growing from its head, thick leaves rustling in the breeze as it stood basking in the sunlight. The footage flew past in a whirlwind, every frame charged with energy. Oh wow! What is this incredible BGM? I'm fired up. The second that intro hit, I felt the blood rushing through me. What are these new Pokémon? Is this the show's opening theme? This hits way harder than anything in the charts right now. That tree-headed one looks really delicious. Wait, no, I mean really lovable. Forget I said that. Hey! That's a Pokémon, not a meal. Keep it together. Dan the Demon King watched the comments pour in and found himself nodding his head along with the beat without even realizing it. What more could you say? Even the opening was this good. Genuinely impressive. Wherever quality breeds, it shows in everything. As the final note of the music faded, the screen held on a still frame. A title slowly materialized. Episode 4, Showdown in Viridian Forest. The Challenge of the Samurai. The scene shifted, and the familiar Viridian Forest reappeared. Sunlight filtered through the canopy. The camera dropped low. 3 figures were struggling through the undergrowth. Ash led the way at the front, map in hand, turning this way and that, his forehead slick with sweat. Misty followed behind him, weighed down by a heavy backpack, her expression hollow and her steps dragging. And Pikachu sat slumped across Ash's shoulder, ears flat, tail drooping, clearly worn out to its limit. Seriously. Misty finally reached her breaking point. She stopped dead, dropped herself onto a tree stump, and dumped her pack on the ground. We've been walking forever and we're still not out of Viridian Forest. Are we just going around in circles? Ash looked back and wiped the sweat from his face. We should be almost out, right? According to the map, 1 left turn and we're there. You've already turned left 3 times. Misty shot back, gesturing in exasperation at the identical trees surrounding them. Ash scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Pika. Pikachu let out a faint, weary cry. He pressed a hand to his stomach, which was growling loudly. He looked as though he was about to collapse from hunger. Ha! The main trio, hopelessly lost as usual. Even Pikachu has checked out at this point. LMAO. Ash's sense of direction is truly one of a kind. Pure chaos energy. Misty's commentary is spot on. Without a GPS, these two would just get lost forever in this forest. Last episode they just caught a Caterpie and now we're back to wandering through the forest. How big is Viridian Forest? Just then, the bushes nearby rustled. Rustle, rustle. Ash snapped to attention immediately. Something's coming out. Chapter 350. The iconic scene. Harden, harden, harden. A brown, segmented caterpillar nosed its way out of the grass. It had a sharp stinger on its tail and a Y-shaped antenna poking up from its head. A Weedle. Ash's eyes lit up, and he reached for his Pokédex. Bug. 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 A sharp, piercing shriek shattered the forest's tranquility. Misty shot backward like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, instantly leaping behind Ash and grabbing his shirt with both hands, trembling uncontrollably. Don't come near me. Get away. Ash looked helplessly at the poor Weedle, which had curled into a frightened ball. What are you scared of? It's just a Weedle. And I want to catch one anyway. Catch it. Misty's eyes went wide. You're seriously going to add another one of those disgusting things to your team? Don't you already have one bug in your party? One more won't hurt. Go, Pidgey. Ignoring Misty's protests, Ash threw his Pokeball without a second thought. A flash of light, and Pidgey burst free, soaring in a wide circle overhead and letting out a bold, clear cry. Pidgey. The Weedle attempted to fight back with its poison sting, but Pidgey was far too fast. It dove sharply, and the wind pressure from its wings sent the Weedle tumbling across the ground. Now's the chance. Pokeball, go. Ash seized the moment and hurled his Pokeball. Thwack. The ball struck Weedle dead on, drawing it inside. The Pokeball rocked back and forth on the ground. Then Weedle burst free in a flash of red light. Capture failed. The comment section erupted. Misty's bug phobia is permanently hardwired in, LMAO. Pidgey is pretty solid here. Flying type beats bug type, just pulled it out and got straight to work. Another bug type? Ash, are you literally the bug type's father? Your team is turning into an ant farm. Please stop, Misty is going to lose her mind. Ash, I will collect every bug and summon the dragon. Ah, It didn't work. Just as Ash pulled out a fresh Pokeball and prepared to have Pidgey wear the Weedle down further, a sharp whistling cut through the air. A wooden sword, trailing a fierce gust of wind, struck the Pokeball clean out of Ash's hand and sent it spinning into the bushes. Hey! Ash froze. From between the trees ahead, a boy stepped slowly into view. He wore a strange samurai outfit, a wide-brimmed straw hat on his head, a mask over his face, and a wooden sword gripped in one hand. His entire presence radiated a cold, threatening energy. Humph! The samurai boy let out a sharp snort and leveled his wooden sword at Ash. Trainer from Pallet Town. Don't move. Ash blinked. Who are you? The samurai boy settled into a fighting stance and spoke in a low, measured tone. I am the samurai of this Viridian forest. Every trainer who comes from Pallet Town must face me in battle. Misty leaned out from behind Ash, looked the boy up and down, and couldn't help herself. Wow, that outfit is seriously retro. Did you time travel from feudal Japan or something? The live chat was equally brutal. A random armored samurai just showed up out of nowhere. The vibe shift is insane. How many trainers are just living in this forest? Okay, but that sword throw was actually sick. This guy might be legit. Wait, what? Misty never misses with the roasts, LMAOO. Ash, however, looked thrilled. He clenched his fist, and his eyes burned with excitement. A battle? I'm going to be a Pokémon master. You don't scare me one bit. A flicker of something like approval crossed the samurai boy's eyes. Good. Then we settle this right here. Ash, come at me. Let's go, let's go. I want to see a real fight. Samurai's got serious swagger. Hope he lasts more than a couple of turns. Isn't Pikachu basically starving at this point? How's he supposed to battle? If you want a fight, I'll give you one. Go, Pidgey. Ash sent out the same Pidgey that had just been in action. Humph. You're really leading with a common bird. The samurai boy shook his head, then drew a Pokeball from his belt and snapped it forward with practiced precision. Let's go, Pinsir. A burst of red light, and a massive bug-type Pokémon materialized on the battlefield. It had two enormous pincers, a sturdy brownish body, and raw, intimidating power. Pinsir. It let out a guttural roar and swung its great claws through the air, the whoosh alone enough to send a chill down your spine. Holy crap, that thing is terrifying. Those pincers look like they could snap bone. I don't even want to think about getting grabbed by those. A bug type can look this cool. I take everything back. This thing is on a completely different level from Caterpie. Not even close. Doesn't matter, we've got the type advantage. Pidgey, use tackle. Ash struck first. Pidgey beat its wings and launched itself like a cannonball toward Pinsir. Pinsir, however, didn't flinch. It watched the incoming opponent with cold, steady eyes. The moment Pidgey was almost upon it, Pinsir snapped its massive horn claws shut in one brutal motion. Crack! Pidgey's wing was caught clean between the pincers. What? Ash's jaw dropped. Pinsir wrenched hard, and with terrifying strength, sent Pidgey flying through the air like a ragdoll. Slam! Pidgey crashed into a tree trunk and slumped to the ground, eyes spiraling into dizzy swirls, completely out of the fight. Pidgey! Ash shouted in disbelief. The samurai boy stared at him coldly. Humph! So this is a Pallet Town trainer. Pathetic. You can't even dodge an attack that's straightforward. It got one shot. The damage, the grab, the throw. Pinsir is built different. Ash is throwing again, Pidgey just got folded. Pidgey, I can't take this anymore. I'm done. That Pinsir has definitely been trained. That Pinsir grab was way too clean. Ash bit his lip and recalled Pidgey. That's not over yet. Your turn. Go, Metapod. A flash of light, and the green, thick-shelled Metapod appeared on the ground. It sat perfectly still. Like a rock. Last episode's evolution shell is finally here. You're seriously sending a cocoon to fight? Are you kidding? Ash, did you run out of options? You're throwing a cocoon into a battle. What does this thing even do besides harden? 5 cents says it gets one shot. Metapod, I'm just sitting here quietly. Why is everyone trying to fight me? The samurai boy looked at Metapod, and a faint sneer crossed his face. Metapod? The one that only knows how to harden? A Pokémon that does nothing but defend is completely useless against an opponent that attacks. Don't underestimate it. Ash shouted back, his gaze firm and unwavering. It worked incredibly hard to evolve to this point. It has a willpower I can't even fully understand. Pretty words. Pinsir, show it what that's worth. Use Vice Grip. Pinsir charged, its enormous claws aimed directly at Metapod, snapping shut with crushing force. Metapod, dodge it! Ash called out on instinct. But Metapod couldn't move. The pincers were closing in, about to crush that hard green shell. Harden! Ash bellowed. Metapod's body instantly took on a metallic sheen, its hardness skyrocketed in an instant. Clang! Pinsir's claws slammed into Metapod's shell and rang out like steel on steel. Not even a scratch. Metapod sat there like an immovable boulder, completely unfazed no matter how hard Pinsir pushed. What? The samurai boy went rigid. Now! Metapod, use tackle! Ash seized the opening. Metapod lurched forward and drove its rock-hard head straight into Pinsir's stomach. Pinsir! Pinsir never expected the rock to hit back. Caught completely off guard, it stumbled backward under the impact and finally toppled over, writhing on the ground in pain. Pinsir was down. Unable to battle. The comment section lost its mind. Wait, it actually won. Won purely by being harder than everything else. Is Metapod literally made of iron? Pinsir, my pincers might be broken. What is this thing made of? Didn't expect the shell to be that tanky. That defense is actually insane. The samurai boy stared at his fallen Pinsir in disbelief, then set his jaw. Fine. If that's how it is, then I'll answer in kind. Go, Metapod. He flung another pokeball. A flash of light, and a second Metapod appeared on the field. And then, two Metapods stood facing each other. Two pairs of eyes. 4 antennae. 2 hard shells. The silence that followed was profoundly awkward. LMAOOO, this is some surrealist comedy. What is this? 2 rocks headbutting each other. Rename this, the hardening contest. Whoever gets hardest wins. Misty's face is literally me right now. Is this supposed to be a battle? Even Pikachu is confused. Pika, are you two competing to see who's harder? Can we get a normal battle please? I'm falling asleep. Ash wasn't about to back down on principle. Metapod, harden. The samurai boy shot back just as fast. Mine too, harden. Harden again. Keep hardening. Both Metapod glowed in alternating pulses, layer after layer of hardness stacking up between them. Pod. Pod. Those two completely flat, emotionless calls were the only sounds in the entire forest. The birds had gone quiet. Misty stood off to the side, jaw hanging open, the corner of her mouth twitching. What kind of battle even is this? You two are just... Pikachu tilted its head, utterly baffled, clearly unable to figure out what exactly was happening in front of it. Pika. As the bizarre stalemate dragged on, a deeply unsettling sound drifted in from somewhere in the distance. Bzzzzzzzzzzz. At first it was faint. Then it swelled, growing louder and louder until it was deafening, as though a swarm of bombers was bearing down on them. Misty's face drained of color. What is that sound? Ash spun around, and his stomach dropped. Pouring out of the treeline in the distance was a churning black mass, rolling toward them like a storm cloud. No. It wasn't a cloud. It was an enormous swarm of beedrill, every one of them striped yellow and black, their massive stingers glinting in the light. What are all those beedrill doing here? The samurai boy's expression had already shifted completely. You tried to catch a Weedle earlier. You've enraged the beedrill colony. Run. All 3 of them turned and bolted. The comments flooded in instantly. Oh my god, that swarm is absolutely horrifying. My trypophobia is screaming. Those are all stingers. Can Pikachu just electrocute them all? Oh wait, Pikachu's basically starving to death. The beedrill swarm moved terrifyingly fast, closing the gap in seconds. In the chaos, one massive beedrill swept down from above, its sharp claws snatching Metapod clean off the ground. Metapod. Ash whipped around in horror, watching helplessly as his Pokémon was carried away. Leave it for now. Keep running. The samurai boy grabbed Ash by the arm. They swarm in a colony. Once you're targeted, there's no shaking them. You go back now, you're dead. Ash stared after his metapod, his chest hollow, but he knew the samurai was right. Move. The three of them sprinted through the dense forest, ducking and weaving between the trees, until the samurai led them to a small, well-hidden wooden cabin where they finally threw themselves inside. Ha, ha. The three collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. After a brief silence, Ash lowered his head. Both hands gripped his knees. His voice cracked. It's my fault. I ran away and left it behind. The samurai boy hung his head too, his expression heavy with guilt. I'm sorry. I'm the one who forced that battle. If I hadn't stopped you, you'd have been out of the forest long before this happened. Misty let out a long sigh and glanced toward the window, where the sky was already going dark. Okay. Blaming each other isn't going to fix anything. It's too dangerous to go back at night. Let's rest up and go look for it at first light. The chat was still talking. At least Ash feels the weight of responsibility toward his Pokémon, even if it took a minute. Honestly, the samurai's not bad. At least he owns it. It's that hard, it'll be fine, right? Please let the bug be alright. Night fell. The forest filled with the distant cries of wild Pokémon, making everything feel just a little more eerie. Ash sat alone by the window, staring out into the dark tangle of trees, his eyes steady and burning with quiet resolve. Metapod, hang on. I'm coming for you. I promise. Moonlight fell softly across his face, so different from the harsh afternoon light that had been beating down when the swarm hit. You've got this. Please bring it home. Metapod, please hurry. I literally cannot move. The next morning, early. All three of them headed straight back to where the battle had taken place. The air still carried the faint trace of yesterday's fight. The ground was marked with obvious signs of the struggle. Ash swept frantically through the area, calling out with barely contained panic. Metapod! Metapod! Finally, they found it, nestled in the branches of a tree. It was an enormous tree, its limbs heavy with dozens of deep yellow cocoon-like Pokémon hanging in clusters. Metapod rested quietly among them. There were a few scratches on its shell, but the hard casing hadn't cracked. Metapod! Ash rushed forward and gathered it up gently in his arms. Metapod made a small, tired sound, like it was answering him. The chat let out one big breath. Oh, thank goodness, it's okay. I knew that shell wasn't going to give out on us. Chapter 351 Breaking Free, A Brand New World? The shell didn't even crack. Definitely an iron shell, that thing's built like a tank. You scared me half to death. Thought we were about to set up a gravestone here. So what are those things in the trees? They look a lot like the iron shell. Just then, a familiar burst of laughter echoed through the forest. Ah ha ha ah ha ha ha. Who's there? The young samurai immediately drew his blade, scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes. The only answer came in the form of a woman's voice. Since you've asked so sincerely, we'll be gracious enough to tell you. That voice. Ash spun around. In a clearing not far away, that iconic Meowth-shaped hot air balloon rose into the sky once more. Jesse and James leaped down from it in their trademark dramatic poses. To protect the world from devastation. To unite all peoples within our nation. To denounce the evils of truth and love. To extend our reach to the stars above. Jesse. James. Team Rocket, blasting off at the speed of light. Surrender now, or prepare to fight. Meowth, that's right. As they made their entrance, the viewers in the livestream were quick to react. Classic villains, right on schedule. I've got their whole speech memorized at this point. Ha ha ha, how do they always show up with such impeccable timing? Coming to get wrecked every episode without fail. Now that's dedication. Pikachu, you two again? Can't you ever try something new? Ash frowned at them. Team Rocket, it's you again. What are you scheming this time? Jessie tossed her hair back and pointed at the Pikachu in Ash's arms. Enough talk. Hand over that rare Pikachu right now. We've brought our latest capture equipment this time. James chimed in, that's right, there's no escaping us today. Behind them, an enormous mech suit rose up from the ground. The two leaped backward and climbed into the cockpit. Pikachu is ours. The two sides squared off, tension crackling in the air, a battle seemingly seconds away. But then, without warning. Buzz! That familiar, unsettling sound rang out again, and this time it was louder, and much closer. What is that noise? Jessie muttered, frowning. Before any of them could react, a massive swarm of beedrill burst from the trees. They blotted out the sky like a living storm cloud rolling in. It's a beedrill swarm! Ash shouted. What? Where did all these beedrill come from? Jessie's face went pale. She clearly hadn't anticipated this. The mech team rocket had arrived and was instantly surrounded by the beedrill charging at the front of the swarm. Hey, hey, hey! Don't wreck our machine! James screamed. Countless stingers drove into the machine's exterior, and several beedrill forced their way directly into the cockpit. Ow, ow, ow! These bugs are vicious! Meowth, stung all over, let out a string of agonized wails. Run for it, Meowth! The live stream erupted with laughter. Beedrill, every last one of you is trash. All of you, back off! Team Rocket, we really can't catch a break. Where did all these beedrill even come from? Karma's a thing. That's what you get for snatching Pokémon all day. Chaos broke out across the clearing. All three members of Team Rocket tucked their heads down and bolted, stumbling and scrambling into the trees without even finishing their motto. The beedrill swarm gave chase, following close behind. But several beedrill stayed behind, locking onto Ash and his companions. Watch out! One beedrill dove straight at Ash, its stinger gleaming as it closed in fast. Pika! Pikachu tried to unleash a bolt of electricity but was a split second too slow. There wasn't enough time. In that razor-thin moment, a green figure leaped up and threw itself in front of Ash. It was Metapod. It used its own hardened body to take the full force of the beedrill's attack head-on. Metapod! Ash cried out in shock. Even with its impressive defense, Metapod wasn't invincible. The beedrill's stinger hit hard, and coming on top of its earlier injuries, Metapod's body began to shudder violently. It had clearly pushed past its limits. Me. And then, something extraordinary happened. Metapod's body suddenly began to radiate a dazzling, multicolored light. Brighter and more intense than anything before. Wait, that light, is that? No way? Evolution? Again. 2 evolutions back-to-back in consecutive episodes? The production team is going all out. The shell is cracking. What form is this? It's stunning. In the blaze of light, cracks began to spread across Metapod's hard outer shell. Crack, crack! The fissures multiplied, and the glow blazed even brighter. Then, a brilliant pillar of prismatic light erupted straight into the sky. The old shell shattered completely. Countless shimmering flakes drifted through the air like glowing snow, painting the scene with something straight out of a fairy tale. Ash and Misty stood there, completely transfixed. The light faded. A great, magnificent butterfly Pokémon floated silently in the air. Its wings were a deep, vivid blue, its body a blend of purple and blue, with bold black patterns traced across its wings. Its large, gentle eyes seemed to take in the world with quiet wonder. It beat its wings slowly, sending a soft breeze drifting through the clearing. Butterfree! It called out in a clear, melodic voice. It evolved from a cocoon into a butterfly. That is absolutely beautiful. The evolution effects in this show are a solid 10 out of 10. Only the second Pokémon to evolve, and it's already this strong. Ash's luck is something else. Metapod, I endured everything, suffered in silence, all for this one moment of flight. Ash's Pokédex chimed in right on cue. Butterfree, the butterfly Pokémon. The scales on its wings repel water, allowing it to fly even in the rain. It is fond of flower nectar and can often be found fluttering through fields in search of blooms. Ash stared at Butterfree, barely able to contain his excitement. Metapod, you evolved. You can fly now. Butterfree turned and looked at him gently, nuzzling against his cheek. But the danger hadn't passed. The remaining beedrill, far from retreating at the sight of Butterfree, grew even more aggressive and charged forward. They're coming again. Misty shrank back, already halfway to turning around and making a run for it. But then Butterfree snapped its wings open wide with a powerful beat. A shimmering cascade of luminescent powder scattered from its wings, drifting through the air like snowflakes toward the beedrill swarm. Whoosh! The moment the beedrill made contact with the powder, their movements grew sluggish. Their eyes went glassy and unfocused. One by one, the beedrill began to yawn, their will to fight dissolving entirely. They drifted lazily to the ground or meandered off into the distance. Amazing! Misty couldn't help but exclaim. Then Butterfree beat its wings again. A dense burst of incredibly sticky silk threads shot out, wrapping the still struggling Team Rocket trio and their mech together into one neat bundle. Hey! Why are we getting tied up too? Jessie flailed helplessly. Pikachu! Ash called out. Pikachu understood immediately. A brilliant surge of electricity flashed through the air. The mech exploded, and Team Rocket shot off into the distance like a comet streaking across the horizon. Their voices carried back faintly in chorus. Looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again. The battle was over. The forest settled back into calm. The young samurai stepped out from behind the trees. He stared up at Butterfree hovering in the sky, his expression filled with awe. Then he looked over at Ash. His gaze grew complex, and after a long moment, it softened into something that looked like genuine respect. He walked up to Ash and bowed deeply. Ash, I concede. Ash quickly reached out and straightened him up. Why? We haven't even finished our battle. The samurai stood up and met his eyes squarely. You're not just strong. You care about your Pokémon deeply. When I saw you throw yourself in front of danger to protect Metapod earlier, I knew it wasn't your skill I was losing to. It was the kind of trainer you were. The fact that your Metapod evolved into a Butterfree this powerful, it's because of the trust between you, isn't it? Ash scratched the back of his head and laughed a little sheepishly. It's nothing special. We just kept working hard together. The samurai smiled, reached into his jacket, and held out a folded map. Here, take this. It's a map of Viridian Forest that I drew myself. I hope it helps you find your way out and get to Pewter City. Ash took the map like he'd just received a treasure. Thank you so much. Farewell. The samurai turned and walked away, his silhouette disappearing quietly among the trees without a backward glance. That samurai actually had some class. He knows how to lose gracefully. Is this what they call mutual respect between rivals? Ash finally got the recognition he deserved. He's not that clueless rookie anymore. That map came at the perfect time. Otherwise they'd still be wandering around lost next year. Butterfree is officially on the team. The squad is seriously stacked now. Misty looked at the map and let out a long, relieved sigh. Finally. Now we can actually head to Pewter City. Ash clenched his fist and looked ahead, his eyes bright with anticipation. Let's go. Onward to the gym. Pika Pika. Butterfree. Trainer and Pokémon together, bathed in warm sunlight, set off on the next leg of their journey. The screen slowly faded to black, leaving behind only those hopeful, retreating silhouettes. That episode had my blood pumping the whole way through. Getting lost, the battle, then the evolution. The pacing on this show is just perfect. Butterfree is so gorgeous. I want one too. Next episode must be Pewter City, right? What gym is that again? Dan the Demon King looked at the flood of comments scrolling across the screen and sighed with feeling. And it's over again. 20 minutes goes by way too fast. Please just drop the next episode already. Back to Kairos. With the 4th episode of the anime now live and no pressing issues in the second world, the time had come to move on to the 4th world. He ducked into a narrow side alley, stopped, and glanced in both directions. Once he was satisfied no one was around and there were no surveillance cameras in sight, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the transit scroll to activate it. A soft glow enveloped him in an instant. In his mind, that familiar mechanical voice rang out. Transit commencing. Please prepare yourself, host. His vision went black. The familiar spinning sensation swept over him. When Kairos opened his eyes again, the world around him had changed completely. He found himself standing at the entrance to an exceptionally busy commercial street. Towering buildings rose on all sides. Massive LED screens mounted on the exterior walls of the surrounding structures cycled through advertisement after advertisement. Neon lights blinked and glittered, splashing the entire street in vivid color that made it as bright as midday. The relentless noise of bumper-to-bumper traffic filled the air, along with the faint mingled smell of car exhaust and deep-fried chicken. Kairos paused, taken aback. The sense of familiarity was almost overwhelming. The glass and steel buildings with their sleek modern facades, the varied and contemporary styles of the people passing by, even the particular texture of the air, it all felt almost identical to the Earth he had known before his very first crossing. Could this be Earth? A flicker of doubt crossed his mind, but he quickly dismissed it. If the transit scroll had brought him here, it definitely wasn't the Earth he'd originally come from. He started walking, making his way to the display window of a nearby shop running a promotional sale. In the bright reflection of the glass, he examined his appearance carefully. The same familiar face looked back at him. Same build, same everything. He was still unmistakably himself. So in this world, his physical appearance hadn't changed. Kairos reached out mentally to the system, hoping to get some context on his identity in this new world. An established identity was always the most important thing to sort out after a crossing. The system's response came quickly. Fourth world detected as a standard parallel universe type world. Host identity set as a non-existent individual. Unlike previous worlds, host has not taken over any original inhabitant's identity. Instead, you are simply an additional body that has appeared in this world. The system has arranged valid legal identification on your behalf and has issued starting funds of 1,000 fourth world currency units. Kairos found the explanation surprisingly refreshing. A non-existent individual. In other words, he was a ghost in this world's system. He had legitimate credentials and could move about freely, but he had no past, no family, and no social connections. Honestly, that seemed like the better deal. Whenever he wanted, he could walk away without leaving a trace. As for the 1,000 in currency, while it didn't sound like much, it was more than enough for Kairos to work with as seed money. What he needed most right now wasn't cash, it was information and connections. He slipped his hand into his pocket and felt the thickness of a wad of paper bills and the firm edge of a card. He pulled them out. Sure enough, it was the 1,000 in cash and a crisp, brand new ID card, exactly as the system had described. He tucked the money back into his pocket and looked around. His gaze swept through the crowd. It didn't take long before he spotted a sign not far ahead, glowing with a steady blue light, Lightning Cyber Cafe. In this era, internet cafes were still one of the fastest and most direct ways to get your hands on information. Kairos turned up his collar, crossed the street, and walked straight toward the cafe. He pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. Through the haze of cigarette smoke, rows of computer screens cast a pale blue glow into the dim room. He went up to the front desk, pulled out his ID, and laid it on the counter. "A private room, please." The guy at the desk was busy staring down at his own screen, mid-game. Without looking up, he jabbed a finger in the direction of a QR code on the counter. Kairos scanned it, paid, and took the room key. He followed the signs up to a small private room on the second floor. The door closed behind him and the noise from outside dropped away almost entirely. He settled into the chair in front of the computer, pressed the power button, and waited for the screen to come on. Chapter 352. Are you sure this is a game and not a movie? As the desktop finished loading, Kairos quickly opened a browser. The cursor blinked in the search bar, and without a moment's hesitation, he typed, Pokémon. Since this was a parallel world, whether this IP existed and what state it was in had to be the first question he answered. He hit enter, and a flood of search results instantly filled the screen. Kairos scrolled through the pages, carefully reading through the information. After skimming more than a dozen pages, a look of genuine surprise slowly crept across his face. This world did have the Pokémon IP, and it had once been glorious. But that was all 10 years ago. According to a deep dive article written by a veteran player, 10 years prior, a fierce power struggle had broken out within the rights holders' company. The upper management had fought so viciously for control that the company descended into chaos, eventually causing its funding to completely collapse. To make things worse, the core development team had taken the key technology and disappeared, bringing all development on the IP to a grinding halt. The long-awaited sequel became a distant dream, and fans went from anticipation, to disappointment, to outright despair. A once glorious franchise had simply been left to rot. When Kairos clicked into a few still active nostalgia forums, he could see plenty of old-school players still venting their grief. Some called it the ultimate will they won they series. Others raged at the rights holders as shameless crooks. And some wrote bitter posts declaring it a cursed IP, since over those 10 years, several major companies had attempted to acquire it, only for each attempt to mysteriously fall apart during the planning stage, whether due to funding issues or sudden cancellations. After enough of that, no one bothered anymore. As for the Pokémon-branded games currently on the market, they were all cheap reskins masquerading as mobile games. A few clicks through the top-ranked titles showed clunky visuals, blatantly plagiarized mechanics, and nothing beneath the Pokémon skin except pay-to-win traps. The reviews were brutal. Kairos closed those pages and sat back in thought. So in this world, Pokémon was already flat on the ground, not moving. In that case, what was the state of the gaming industry as a whole? He cleared the search bar and began looking up news on gaming and entertainment. This time, what came up actually caught his attention. This world's entertainment industry was thriving across the board. Film, music, and media were all flourishing. Gaming, however, was noticeably lagging behind, with high-quality titles being rare exceptions rather than the rule. But just last month, the world's first consumer-grade VR headset, the Horizon 1, had launched. Reviews noted that the technology was still rough around the edges, mediocre resolution, visible grain in the visuals, and an absurd price tag running into the tens of thousands. Even so, the device's pitch of full virtual reality had drawn wealthy early adopters and hardcore enthusiasts in droves. While Kairos was reading through VR-related news, a brightly colored pop-up appeared in the lower right corner of the screen. It read, in bold letters, "The first annual Apex Cup game development competition is now open." Kairos's eyes sharpened slightly. He clicked the banner. The page laid out the competition rules in detail. The theme was intriguing, a new perspective. The grand prize included top-tier promotional placement across all major platforms, a sponsored giveaway of 100,000 copies of the winning game to players, and a cash prize of 50 million. Kairos's eyebrow went up. 50 million was nothing to sneeze at, though at this point in his life, the money itself held almost no appeal. The 100,000 copy giveaway, on the other hand, was the real draw. That kind of distribution would supercharge a game's exposure, essentially functioning as a massive injection of organic traffic. Come to think of it, the system had issued a new mission just yesterday: create a game built around the perspective of a villain. Villain perspective. That fit perfectly with what this world needed. Kairos's thoughts began to race. If the villain in question was from Pokémon, there was really only one answer: Team Rocket. They were the childhood menace of an entire generation, the most iconic villainous organization in the franchise's history. In a traditional Pokémon game, the player took the role of a righteous trainer, collecting gym badges, challenging leaders, and eventually dismantling some evil organization along the way to save the world. But what if it were flipped? What if the player took the role of a low-ranking grunt in Team Rocket, starting from the very bottom, stealing other trainers' Pokémon, evading the League's officers, and gradually carving out dominance over an entire region? That kind of gameplay would feel genuinely fresh to any player. Kairos himself wasn't particularly fond of the idea of stealing Pokémon in real life, but in a game, the meaning was entirely different. The whole point of a game was to let players experience lives they couldn't otherwise live, even the life of a villain. And besides, even as a Team Rocket grunt, the player wouldn't necessarily have to steal. They could still choose to experience the world's cruelty and excitement from a villain's vantage point, on their own terms. With that, Kairos took a slow breath and closed all the cluttered browser tabs. He had a direction. Time to get started. He focused inward, pulling up the system's interface in his mind and selecting the virtual reality development module. The current state of VR technology was still primitive, but games built through the module should be able to adapt perfectly to any hardware. He selected the Kanto region as the starting map and activated the map module. The moment he confirmed the selection, the system immediately pulled up the scan data he had collected in the first world. Torrents of data streamed across the screen as Kanto reconstructed itself in extraordinary detail: every tree in Viridian Forest, every stone in Pewter City, every inch of MT Moon, all rendered at a perfect 1:1 scale. Next came the character models. Kairos pulled up a Team Rocket grunt uniform from the asset library, that sleek black bodysuit with the bold red R on the chest, and felt a wave of nostalgia hit him. Beyond the main character, he populated the world with classic Pokémon used by Rocket grunts, along with the bewildered civilian trainers who would serve as the targets, each one carefully crafted. For the core mechanics, he wrote code for systems like stealing and capturing. In the private room, the rhythm of keystrokes grew faster and more insistent. Lines of code streamed down the screen like a waterfall. 2 hours passed. Across the city, the top floor of a high-end apartment building blazed with light. This was the home of a well-known streamer who went by Big Wave, real name Dave. With 3 million followers, he had a reputation as a no-nonsense, brutally honest gaming commentator. It was 2 in the morning. Big Wave sat in front of his premium streaming setup, stifling a long yawn that squeezed tears from the corners of his eyes. He had been live for 5 straight hours riding the wave of the Apex Cup buzz, and in that time he had test played no fewer than 20 entries. Honestly, the quality was hard to watch. Everything was either visually stuck in the last century or so baffling in its design choices that it made you question reality. There was no genuine playability to be found anywhere. The chat had shifted from excited anticipation at the start of the stream to wall-to-wall mockery. Big wave, is this competition just all garbage? Bro, stop torturing yourself. Log off and eat something. What is any of this? My grandma could make a better game with her feet. I'm out. Can't watch this. Big wave sighed at the screen. I want to log off too, guys, but I gotta ride this trend all the way. What if something great shows up later? He said it, but he didn't really believe it anymore. He rubbed his throbbing temples and scrolled lazily through the game list. Then something stopped his cursor. It was a plain icon, pure black background, a single white R drawn in clean, simple lines. Title, Pokémon, Grunt's Gambit. Big Wave stared at it for a moment, then nearly burst out laughing. Wait, what? Pokémon? Who the hell is still making Pokémon games? That one outburst jolted the half-asleep viewers in his chat back to life. The messages came flooding in. Am I reading that right? Pokémon. Ha ha ha, are you messing with me? That dead IP. This has to be some clout-chasing stunt. Can fan games even enter this competition? Don't bother, streamer. This is definitely one of those pay-to-win reskins, or some die-hard fans template project. Exactly. Anyone making an indie Pokémon game in this day and age, the grass on that grave is 2 meters tall. Big Wave laughed along with the chat. At this point, the word Pokémon was practically synonymous with terrible games. Still, staring at that oddly charming little icon, he figured, why not? He had nothing better to do. It would give the audience something to roast, and roasting always drove up engagement. Alright, since you all want to see it, let's find out what kind of creature this actually is. He moved the cursor and clicked the purchase link, fully expecting to be greeted by some spend $6, get a legendary Pokémon screen. Instead, when the payment window appeared, he froze completely. The price field showed a number that made him question everything he knew. Price, $15. Big Wave rubbed his eyes and looked again. $15. That was not a typo. What? Did I read that wrong? 15 bucks? He genuinely couldn't help himself. A random indie game costs $60 or $70 minimum these days. Is this developer running a charity, or did they just lose their mind? The chat erupted. $15. No way, that's insane. Bought. Bought immediately. Worth it just for the laugh. Streamer, don't think, just buy it. At $15 you literally cannot lose. Let's go. With the chat egging him on, Big Wave stopped hesitating and clicked the buy button. $15 was one fewer cup of bubble tea. If he got scammed, so be it. He took a breath, held it for a moment with his finger hovering over the confirmation button, then pressed it. A cheerful chime signaled the successful payment. Almost simultaneously, the download bar shot from 0 to 100% as if it had been rocket-propelled. That fast? Big Wave blinked, then instinctively right-clicked to check the file properties. When he saw the number, his suspicions were fully confirmed. This had to be a cheap, slapped-together mess. The installer was 485 MB. 485 megabytes? Modern indie games are dozens of gigabytes these days. What could you possibly fit in 400 megs? A loading screen. He leaned into the mic, voice dripping with contempt. Guys, that's not even enough for a high-res texture pack. Did this developer just zip up some old browser game assets and call it a day? The chat was right there with him. 485 MB? I'm dying. My phone's MIM folder is bigger than that. Just refund it, streamer. Don't waste your time. This is one of those ad-infested trash heaps. $15, and a lesson learned. Worst scam of the stream, Big Wave. Even while roasting it, Big Wave decided to see it through. Money was already spent. Besides, being a hardcore gaming commentator meant doing his due diligence, even with garbage, so the audience could see exactly what kind of garbage it was. Alright, 485 megs. Show me what you've got. He reached over to a shelf beside him and lifted down a dramatically styled headset. This was the Horizon 1, the VR device that had just launched a while back. He had dropped most of his savings on it, and it had been sitting in his apartment collecting dust ever since, because the VR game library was in a genuinely sorry state. The so-called flagship titles were a handful of basic shooters with visuals so blocky they looked like pixel art, and 2 minutes in, you were reaching for painkillers. You've got the nerve to charge $15. Let's see how you hold up against a $50,000 headset. He pulled the Horizon 1 over his head, adjusted the straps, and pressed the power button. A faint electrical hum, and then the real world faded away, replaced by a perfectly black void. Where's the loading screen? Not even a logo. He was muttering to himself in the darkness, hand already moving to take the headset off in case it had crashed. Then the thunderous roar of engines reached him, low, dense, and deeply oppressive, seeming to roll in from somewhere impossibly far away before detonating right inside his skull. The next instant, a blinding wall of white light tore the darkness apart. Big Wave flinched and squeezed his eyes shut, but when he finally forced them open and took in the scene before him, he went completely rigid in his gaming chair, mouth hanging open wide enough to fit a fist. This couldn't be real. Are you sure this is a game and not a movie? Against a sky choked with roiling storm clouds, an enormous airship tore through the heavens black as midnight, a floating fortress of steel and ambition, cutting through the churning cloud cover with absolute, terrifying authority. Chapter 353 The Glory of Team Rocket. On the side of the airship, a massive crimson R gleamed with a heart-stopping radiance in the faint sunlight filtering through the cloud cover. A sweeping, grandiose symphony surged to life, every note striking his eardrums like a hammer blow. The camera pulled back at breakneck speed, sweeping downward to survey the vast expanse of land below. Across that sprawling landscape, countless figures dressed in black form-fitting uniforms, each bearing the same R insignia on their chests, stood in perfect formation. Their discipline was ironclad, their movements synchronized to a razor's edge, like a battle-hardened army forged of steel. The camera cut again, this time moving inside the airship. A magnificent golden hall stretched into the distance, flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows. Rows of agents in elite uniforms lined both sides, each one paying reverence toward the towering throne at the far end of the hall. Upon the throne sat a figure, shown only from behind. His face was hidden, yet the sheer authority and dominance radiating from that silhouette alone was enough to make the air feel suffocating. One hand rested lightly on the armrest, the other idly toyed with a poke ball, as though the entire world lay within his grasp. Outside the airship, the spectacle grew even more breathtaking. HR Izzard, engulfed in roaring flames, let out a deafening roar as it soared through the sky, its wings churning scorching currents of air. A Zapdos wreathed in crackling electricity tore across the heavens, its lightning illuminating the entire sky. It was a beauty born of absolute order and overwhelming power, an almost irresistible, villainous charisma that made one want to kneel. Big Wave was completely stunned. What kind of graphics were these? What kind of cinematography was this? What kind of modeling fidelity was this? This was better than those premium virtual blockbusters he'd paid hundreds of dollars to watch in specialty theaters. What the hell? Big Wave was floored. This game is 400 megabytes, this has to be real-time rendering, right? You're telling me this is 400 megabytes? At the same time, the live chat had fallen into a stunned silence from the sudden visual assault, only to erupt moments later in an absolute frenzy. What the hell? What level of production is this? $15. Those lighting effects, that modeling. Is this real? Is my GPU about to combust? Team Rocket is actually this cool? How did I never notice the villains had this much style before? What? This modeling? These graphics? This is actually Pokémon. Something seriously off about this visual quality. This opening cinematic goes so hard. This is the villain organization? Why does the opening CG focus on the villain organization? And why do they make them look this absolutely badass? This art direction is nothing like the Reskin games flooding the market these days. This has to be a top-tier development team, no question. Big Wave hadn't fully recovered from the visual onslaught, but as a seasoned gamer, his mind was already racing. Something wasn't right. This art direction wasn't right. He'd done his research on the Pokémon IP before. The CG was jaw-dropping, sure, but the content itself. Team Rocket were the villains of Pokémon, that much was accurate. So why had this game's opening cinematic devoted so much screen time to building up Team Rocket's power and prestige? Combined with the game's title, Pokémon, Grunt's Gambit. Could it be? This wasn't just a game set against the backdrop of Team Rocket. This was a game where players genuinely took on the role of Team Rocket members. Where the player wasn't the champion of justice, but instead joined this criminal organization to conquer the world. That would mean playing as the villain. Now this is interesting. The contempt that had been written across Big Wave's face had long since vanished, replaced by excitement and curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time. If that was really the case, this could actually be something special. Just then, the stirring music in the scene cut off abruptly. The golden, imposing imagery shattered in an instant. The color palette shifted violently, draining into grey, cold, oppressive tones of black and white. Before Big Wave could even process the change, the scene before him had already transformed into a crumbling, dilapidated orphanage. Broken walls. Overgrown weeds. A biting wind howled through shattered windows, letting out a mournful wail. The camera closed in, focusing on a thin little boy. He wore a tattered, patch-covered shirt. His hair was a disheveled mess, his face caked with dirt. He huddled in a corner, trembling in the cold, his eyes vacant and hollow. The scene flashed. A group of wealthy kids appeared, dressed in fine, bright clothes, directing their Ratata and Oddish to torment the small boy. A Ratata's teeth sank into his leg, drawing blood, while the rich children laughed without a care in the world. Another flash. This time, law enforcement officers from the League, those who were supposed to represent justice, roughly shoving children like him off the streets, as though they were filth that needed to be swept away and forgotten. Finally, the scene froze on a muddy street. In a puddle of mire, the small boy wrestled a stray puchayana for half a discarded steamed bun. He clutched it with everything he had, taking bite after bite alongside the puchayana without ever loosening his grip. A gravelly, aged voice began to narrate, laden with a weariness that spanned a lifetime. In a world blessed by the gods, no one cares whether an ant lives or dies. Whether it's the righteous league or the lofty trainers who look down from on high, to them, you don't even register as dust. Big Wave went quiet. He'd expected a power fantasy where you played as the boss of Team Rocket. He hadn't expected the game to open like this, with something so heavy, so thoroughly bleak. The chat had gone quiet too. The flood of holy shit and insane comments tapered off, replaced by something more complicated. Whiplash much. 1 second it's the evil empire, the next it's a tearjerker. The protagonist starts off this rough? My chest feels tight just watching this. Damn. That's genuinely rough. Just as that weight settled over the room, the aged voice returned. Until one day. The mud-streaked boy slowly raised his head. He saw a massive airship descending above him. On its hull was a vivid red emblem. R. Sirens wailed across the city in its wake. People began to scatter in a panic, screaming as they fled. The narration resumed. The ant lifted its head. And it realized that in a world that devours the weak, righteousness is worthless. Only strength. Only becoming powerful. Only, becoming evil. And from that moment on, his life was never the same. The screen went black the instant the words faded. Big Wave rubbed his chin. That actually made sense. No fluff. No moralizing. Just raw, visceral visuals that told the player exactly why someone would join Team Rocket. Not because they were born evil, but because they wanted to survive. Damn, who wrote this? There's no credit listed. Interesting. Big Wave tabbed out of the window and slapped his knee in genuine excitement. Stories framed this way were rare, he'd give it that. He was still turning the opening over in his mind when he tabbed back into the game, and the darkness in front of him dissolved once more. This time, there was no loading screen, no transition effect. It was as though he'd simply blinked, and when his eyes opened again, the world had changed. What is this? On instinct, Big Wave turned his head slightly. The view in front of him shifted in perfect sync with his movement. No lag. No stutter. Smooth in a way that defied explanation. He was looking at a lush, dense forest. Enormous trees stretched skyward, blotting out the sun. Every leaf shone with vivid green, its texture rendered in crisp detail. Sunlight broke through the heavy canopy in piercing columns, scattering dappled light across a moss-covered forest floor. In those columns of light, countless tiny motes of dust drifted lazily in the gentle breeze. From somewhere in the distance came a clear, crisp call. Pidgey. It sounded so real, as though a Pidgey had landed on a branch directly above him. A soft gust of wind swept through, and the rustle of leaves followed, murmuring just beside his ear. Big Wave reached out instinctively, as if trying to touch the air itself. He felt nothing but air, and yet the immersion was so overwhelming that an illusion took hold of him. He almost felt the rough texture of bark beneath his fingertips. Almost caught the scent of damp earth. Holy hell, those lighting effects! That resolution! Is this really something $15 can buy? Big Wave finally lost all composure. The moment he pulled off the headset, he felt a strange pang of loss, as though he'd fallen out of a dream and back into a dull reality. But the stream feed from the headset faithfully captured everything that had just happened. Guys, did you see that? Big Wave was visibly worked up. I always knew VR games could be good if someone actually put in the work. I said it. Look at the detail on that grass, look at the way those leaves move, look at the light refraction, that felt more real than reality itself. The chat exploded all over again. 500 megabytes, and it runs better than today's so-called AAA titles? What have those multi-gigabyte games even been doing? Big Wave, when you reached out just now, I genuinely thought you were about to touch the screen. That forest. I could have sworn I smelled something. Am I losing it? $15. I'd pay $500 for this. What is going on with the developers? The Apex Cup actually produced a masterpiece? This is only the first entry and it's already this absurd. Guys, something's off. Big Wave's brow furrowed suddenly. His hand drifted unconsciously toward his stomach, and a strange expression crossed his face. Does anyone else feel kind of hungry? The chat scrolled into overdrive immediately. Didn't you just finish eating a late-night snack? You're hungry already? Are you a pig? Stop exaggerating. VR might be immersive, but it can't simulate actual physiological hunger, come on. You probably just watched that orphanage scene and got hungry thinking about steamed buns. That's all it is. Stop performing, your acting is terrible. The things people do to farm reactions these days. Big Wave shook his head. He knew the chat wasn't buying it, but the sensation in his gut was terrifyingly real. It wasn't the casual craving you'd get for a snack. It was something deeper, something like having gone days without eating, the hollow ache of stomach walls grinding against each other. I'm serious, I'm not messing with you, Big Wave said directly into the microphone, I genuinely feel like I've gone days without eating inside this world. Is this game actually interfacing with nerve signals? As he spoke, he guided the gaunt little boy and stepped slowly out of the dark corner. As the character moved, Big Wave discovered with astonishment that he could feel the sensation of footsteps on dead leaves and dry branches underfoot. The uneven feedback between the real and the simulated kept throwing him off, making it nearly impossible to tell which world was real and which was simulated. Just then, a tremendous rumbling erupted from above. Big Wave looked up by reflex. The sky, which had been hidden beneath the dense forest canopy, was suddenly swallowed by an enormous shadow. A sleek black airship, angular and menacing in design, slowly broke through the cloud layer and hovered directly above the forest. Along its hull, that vivid crimson R gleamed beneath the sun, impossibly vivid, like a scarlet eye staring down at the world with cold indifference. Holy crap, that airship, the sheer presence of it. Big Wave couldn't help but marvel, the modeling on this thing is unreal. You can actually see individual metal scratches on the hull. At that moment the scene shifted, and a tall man in a black uniform and dark sunglasses materialized directly in front of the protagonist. He was powerfully built. His dark coat billowed in the absence of any wind. His face carried no expression whatsoever, his gaze ice cold. Kid. The man's voice was low and resonant, and it reached Big Wave's mind through the VR headset with startling clarity, carrying with it a chill that raised the hair on the back of his neck. You look like things haven't been going very well for you. The camera moved in close, putting the protagonist's ragged clothes and filth-smeared face on full display. Big Wave instinctively had the protagonist give a small nod without saying a word. The faintest curve appeared at the corner of the man's mouth. It wasn't a smile. It was the assessing look of someone peering down from an untouchable height. There's an opportunity, right now, that could give you a completely different life. He extended one black-gloved hand, palm facing upward. What do you say? Two options appeared on the screen. Refuse. Nod. Big Wave barely hesitated before selecting nod. Obviously. Who would dare refuse in a situation like this? This villain boss radiated danger. Refusing would probably get you killed on the spot. The moment the protagonist nodded, the man pulled his hand back with a look of satisfaction and snapped his fingers. Good. The scene flashed violently, and the wave of dizziness that followed made Big Wave shake his head to steady himself. When he opened his eyes again, the surroundings had completely changed. Gone was the lush forest. In its place stood a desolate island suspended in the open sea. The sky pressed down like a lid about to collapse, heavy storm clouds churning overhead in an oppressive grey-green hue. Waves crashed against the rocks below with dull, rolling thunder. The island was littered with overgrown ruins and rusted barbed wire fencing. A handful of worn-out tents were scattered across the corners, while Team Rocket agents in identical black uniforms patrolled in steady, mechanical intervals, their faces blank and their movements robotic. Even the background music had shifted. No more rousing orchestra. Now it was something low and suffocating, a sound that pressed down on the chest. This atmosphere. Big Wave drew a slow breath, feeling his own mood sink involuntarily under the weight of it all. Is this Team Rocket's new recruit training camp? This feels more oppressive than a prison. At that moment, a sharp bark rang out from ahead. Fall in. Chapter 354 The Law of the Jungle, The Rocket Trial. Big Wave steered his character and ran over to find that more than a dozen kids around his age were already standing there. Every one of them was gaunt and sallow, their eyes filled with fear and unease. Standing before them was a new Team Rocket executive. This one was different from the last. He was younger, but far more ruthless. A long scar ran down his face from the corner of his eye all the way to his chin, marring what might have been decent looks and giving him an air of menace. He wore a sharp black uniform, a silver badge pinned to his chest, hands clasped behind his back. His piercing gaze swept over the group. Everyone lowered their heads and held their breath. The executive let out a cold snort and spoke. His voice was quiet, but carried an unmistakable authority. Welcome to hell. In any other game, Big Wave might have laughed at a line like that. But right now, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he just frowned. This trial is the official Team Rocket entrance qualification exam, 7 days of wilderness survival. The executive raised one finger. There is only one core rule: stay alive and complete your objectives. He then began reciting the trial regulations. 1. All useless emotions, useless sympathy, and useless mercy are strictly forbidden. 2. Reckless action is forbidden, allowing personal feelings to endanger yourself or the mission is forbidden. 3. Survival, efficiency, and results take absolute priority. 4. Team Rocket has no need for bleeding hearts, cowards, or anyone weak enough to fail because of kindness. He paused here, fixing the group with a dead stare as his voice turned glacial. Any violation of the core principles results in immediate disqualification and permanent expulsion. Silence fell over the entire area. Big Wave was stunned. What the hell? Team Rocket is actually this serious? Aren't they supposed to be the comic relief villains? He watched the kids on screen trembling in place, and felt a strange, creeping tension rise in his chest. The live chat exploded. Wow, straight into hard mode from the jump. Wild concept. They're literally making evil the core value system. So the streamer's about to go through this trial? This is going to be rough to watch. Useless mercy is forbidden, so mercy itself isn't? Interesting. Big Wave opened up, visibly on edge. Alright chat, this game is clearly not messing around. If the hunger pangs from before were any indication, surviving 7 days out here was going to be harder than any battle royale. The scene shifted, and the trial began. Big Wave guided his character to the far end of the island. This was true wilderness. Dead yellow grass grew taller than a person. Withered trees clawed at the sky with twisted branches. The last light of the setting sun stretched his shadow long across the ground. A cold wind swept through, stirring the fallen leaves with a dry, rustling sound. Big Wave instinctively hunched his shoulders, as if he could actually feel the chill. The detail in this game is still something else. He opened the inventory screen, hoping to find some starting gear. But when the menu loaded, he just stared. Empty. Nothing but a battered water bottle with half a serving of water left. No pokeballs, no potions, not even a pocket knife. You've got to be kidding me. We're starting with literally nothing. Big Wave's eyes went wide. How are we supposed to play like this? Run into a wild Pokémon and we're just done. He moved his character forward through the wilderness. Every step felt heavy, dragged down by bone-deep exhaustion. The hunger was getting worse. A gnawing cramp in the stomach kept forcing him to stop and catch his breath. Weird. How was this game making him feel this stuff? Just as he rounded a bend, a figure burst out of the tall grass. Big Wave jumped so hard he nearly knocked something over. Who's there? He looked closer. It was a boy about the same age as his character. Just as thin, dressed in ragged clothes, face smeared with grime. But unlike his character, this kid's eyes were sharp and guarded, his expression locked tight. He had a jagged rock clenched in his fist and was staring at Big Wave's character with the focused intensity of someone ready to fight to the death. Big Wave quickly backed his character up 2 steps and raised both hands to show he wasn't a threat. The boy watched for a long moment, and once he seemed satisfied there was no danger, he relaxed slightly, though he kept his distance. The two of them stood there in silence, sizing each other up. The wind howled through the wilderness between them. After a long stretch of nothing, Big Wave cautiously stepped his character forward. The boy didn't move. Didn't object. And just like that, the two reached an unspoken agreement, travel together, at least for safety. They walked without talking. The boy stayed on high alert the whole time, eyes scanning in every direction. At the slightest noise, his entire body would go rigid, instantly ready to fight. Big Wave watched this quiet, guarded companion and felt a flicker of curiosity. This kid doesn't feel like a normal NPC. What's his story? The scene shifted. Night fell. The wilderness at night was colder and more dangerous than the day. The two found shelter behind a cluster of rocks and built a small fire. The flames flickered and danced, casting pale light across their faces. Big Wave set his character down by the fire and stared into it, mind drifting. Then, without warning, the boy who had barely said a word finally spoke. His voice was flat, carrying a weariness that had no business being in someone so young. You know, I never had anyone looking out for me. Big Wave blinked and looked over at him. The boy kept his eyes on the fire, like he was talking to himself. Got robbed, got beaten, got laughed at. Couldn't even afford a poke ball. There was no bitterness in his voice. Just a kind of hollow calm. The League only sees prodigies, rich kids, big families. People like me are invisible. He tilted his head back, looked up at the dark sky, with the ghost of a bitter smile on his lips. I have to fight just to survive every single day. And they get to walk through life like it's nothing. Don't you think that's unfair? Big Wave felt something heavy settle in his chest. He didn't know what to say. The boy turned to look at him, those hard, cold eyes cutting straight through. This world runs on one rule, the strong take from the weak. Soft hearts get walked over. If you don't want to be the one getting crushed, you have to be meaner and harder than everyone else. That's why I want to join Team Rocket. He said nothing more after that, just looked back down and tossed another dry branch onto the fire. Big Wave went quiet. He didn't respond. He just watched the fire burn. He didn't agree with any of it. But he understood that for this kid, these weren't opinions. They were survival rules, learned the hard way. The live chat went quiet too. These two are both just, tragic. This hit me harder than I expected. How is this game so real? Team Rocket is basically a shelter for people the world threw away. What he's saying is awful, but given where he came from, in this world, it kind of makes sense. Big Wave let out a long breath into the mic. His thinking is way too extreme. But when you think about what he's been through, it's hard to argue with. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, both of them packed up and headed deeper into the forest. Under the trial rules, they had to push farther in to find enough supplies to stay alive. The farther they went, the harder it got. It wasn't long before they reached a fork in the path. The left path was choked with tall, restless, overlapping Pokémon cries drifting out from somewhere inside the grass. The right path opened into a grove of dead trees, eerily still and silent, but seemingly safer. Big Wave hesitated. By standard game logic, noise on the left meant an event, while the quiet path on the right probably meant nothing. Let's go left. Might be something worth finding. He moved his character without hesitation into the grass on the left. But they hadn't gone far before he stopped dead. In a small clearing up ahead, a brown weedle was being swarmed. 3 Pidgey had it surrounded. The weedle was covered in wounds, its green body riddled with pecks and bite marks. It shuddered and scraped frantically at the ground, desperate to burrow away, but the Pidgey gave it no opening, attacking again and again. HSS. A weak, miserable cry escaped the Weedle. The image hit hard. Big Wave watched the little creature trembling and felt his chest tighten. That's brutal. The chat started lighting up. Are you going to save it, streamer? Obviously. That's what you do in every game. Save it, get affection points, maybe even catch it. He was already moving his character forward as he talked. Here we go, little guy. I've got you. Reality answered with a slap to the face. His character had no Pokémon, no weapons, nothing but his bare hands. The moment he charged into the fray, one of the Pidgey wheeled around and drove its beak straight into his arm. Ow! Big Wave yelped as a bloody gash opened across the arm. 2 more Pidgey immediately flew at him, ramming him to the ground. I can't move. Big Wave was sweating, frantically mashing controls trying to get up, but nothing worked. All he could do was watch as the Weedle took hit after hit, its wounds mounting until finally, it let out one last sharp, desperate cry and collapsed motionless to the ground. Then the world drained to grey. While Big Wave sat there in stunned silence, a cold voice came from somewhere above, the executives, completely devoid of emotion. Reckless compassion saves no one. It only drags you down with them. Team Rocket has no use for fools who can't make basic judgments. Goodbye. Big Wave. The chat detonated. Comments flooded in like water through a burst dam. What? You save it and still fail. First time I've seen a game end because you picked the kind option. That's called subverting expectations. Exactly. You ran in with empty hands. What did you think was going to happen? This game doesn't moralize at you. Love that. Big Wave stared at the grey screen for a long moment without speaking. Finally, he let out a dry laugh into the mic. Alright chat, I was wrong. I thought this was a feel-good game where doing the right thing always works out. But this game is actually teaching me something. Reckless compassion, yet. What I just did, if that was real. All I accomplished was making myself feel heroic. Nothing else. He took a slow breath, and his expression steadied. Alright. Loading the save. We're trying again. The scene snapped back to the fork in the path. Big Wave stood his character at the junction and took a breath. I think the game isn't saying don't help. It's saying, earn the right to help first. This time, he looked to the right. Let's check the other path. See if there's anything useful. He guided his character into the dead grove. The air was dim and damp, heavy with the smell of rot. The ground was blanketed in thick fallen leaves that gave softly underfoot. Big Wave moved carefully, searching every corner. Then something in a shadowed spot caught his eye. A thick wooden branch, abandoned there by someone at some point, looked worn but was solid and dense, satisfyingly heavy in the hand. Obtained, crude wooden club. Item grade, D. Note, a sturdy stick. At least it's better than your fists. Yes. Big Wave's mood flipped immediately. With this, I can actually take on those Pidgey. Without another thought, he turned and ran straight back toward the left path. The scene played out the same way. The Weedle was still surrounded, still losing ground. But this time, Big Wave was ready. He gripped the club tight and charged in with a shout. Back off! The club cut through the air and cracked hard into the nearest Pidgey. A sharp smack. The bird screeched and spun away, clearly dazed. The others flinched back, thrown off by the sudden attack. Big Wave didn't give them time to recover. He worked the club steadily, blocking, swinging, staying in control. The movements weren't refined, but they were focused and deliberate. One Pidgey dove at him beak first. He sidestepped and brought the club down across its wing on the backswing. 2 more tried to flank him. Big Wave read it early and batted them away before they could connect. Slowly, the wild Pokémon began to give ground. This human with a club, fighting with calm, relentless intensity, wasn't worth the trouble. They called out a few last indignant cries and scattered, disappearing into the grass. The fight was over. Big Wave's character stood there breathing hard, a handful of minor cuts on his arms, but nothing serious. He turned and looked down at the Weedle. The Weedle lifted its head weakly and looked up at the human boy in front of it. Fear still lived in its eyes, but underneath it, something else had taken root, gratitude. It worked its battered little body forward, inching across the ground until it reached Big Wave's feet, then pressed its scarred head gently against his shoe. The contact was through a screen, through a game, through a world that wasn't real. And yet, somehow, it left a warmth in Big Wave's chest that felt completely genuine. Chapter 355 Bonds and Evolution, the trial begins. Phew. Big Wave let out a long breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Now that's how it's done. He glanced down at the Weedle sitting obediently at his feet, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile. From now on, you're rolling with me. Just then, a cold snort came from nearby. Big Wave turned to look. It was his companion, who had been standing off to the side watching with detached eyes the whole time. His face wore an expression of indifference and contempt, his gaze filled with disapproval. You could have just walked away. His voice was cold and blunt, cutting through the warmth of the moment without mercy. The trial is what matters. Wasting time and taking risks for a worthless Weedle. He shook his head, as if looking at someone beyond reason. I don't think you made the right call. The character Big Wave was controlling said nothing, only watching him in silence. His companion continued, his tone growing harsher. Softness will only drag you down. Compassion is a luxury people like us can't afford. In Team Rocket, staying cold is how you survive. Apparently convinced that the protagonist was a bleeding heart destined to go nowhere, he said his piece and turned away without another glance, walking off on his own. The protagonist remained silent, offering no defense, only quietly crouching down to scoop up the injured Weedle in his arms. The chat in the live stream erupted into debate again. His companion has a point, though. The trial really does matter. But still, you couldn't just leave it there, could you? Playing a game and suddenly it's a clash of values. I think the protagonist did the right thing. What makes us human is exactly that kind of compassion. But this is Team Rocket. What good is compassion here? Big Wave watched his companion's retreating figure and sighed. That guy's way too extreme. But maybe, that's just how he learned to survive in a world that harsh. Time flew by, and before long, the in-game trial had reached its 7th day. Over those 7 days, Big Wave's protagonist and his companion had continued traveling together, though they exchanged very few words. The Weedle, under his careful attention, had made a full recovery and now followed him everywhere, becoming his most loyal companion. That night, a storm was coming. The sky hung low and dark. A howling wind swept up sand and gravel from the ground, stinging against the skin. Big Wave guided the protagonist and his companion to take shelter in a cave, while thunder rolled and boomed outside. Without warning, a deep, ferocious roar tore through the curtain of rain and reached their ears with startling clarity. A woo! The sound radiated pure savagery and killing intent, sending a chill down the spine. Immediately after, the underbrush thrashed violently, and a massive dark shape came charging out of the darkness. It was a berserk mytaina. Its frame was a full size larger than an ordinary mytaina, its entire body radiating dark-type energy, its eyes a burning crimson, fangs bared, saliva dripping from the corners of its jaw. The pressure it exuded was overwhelming. Big Wave froze. How are we supposed to fight that? The other new recruits had already fallen apart, screaming and scattering in every direction, not one of them willing to stand their ground. The mytaina paid no attention to those fleeing underlings. Its gaze locked hard onto the protagonist and his companion. As if sensing something, it suddenly launched off its hind legs like a black cannonball and came hurtling straight at them. Run! His companion shouted and spun to flee. But the mytaina was too fast. In an instant it was right on top of them. That reeking maw gaped open, wide enough to crush a skull in a single bite. Everyone squeezed their eyes shut, certain the protagonist was done for. Then, in that razor-thin moment between life and death, a small figure suddenly shot out from behind the protagonist. It was the Weedle. Its tiny body looked almost laughably small against the mytaina, little more than a speck of dust. But its eyes held absolute resolve, without a trace of hesitation. It placed itself between Big Wave and the threat. Hiss! Weedle! The moment clearly caught Big Wave completely off guard. He cried out involuntarily. There was no way the Weedle could take a hit from that mytaina. The mytaina's claws flashed. But the Weedle wasn't torn apart. The Weedle let out a cry with everything it had. And then its body began to glow. The light grew brighter and brighter, more and more blinding, flooding the entire cave in an instant and even outshining the lightning outside. The Weedle was evolving. Big Wave's eyes went wide, his heart pounding. It's evolving. Within the radiance, the Weedle's body began to change. Its soft form hardened and transformed into a large cocoon. Kakuna. But it wasn't over. The light didn't fade. If anything, it intensified. Cracks began to spread across Kakuna's shell, and an even greater surge of energy erupted from within. Crack! A sound like splitting bone, and the shell shattered. Standing before them was a sleek Pokémon clad in yellow and black armor plating, 4 great wings spread wide, a pair of lethal stingers at the ready. Beedrill. 2 consecutive rapid-fire evolutions. The entire cave fell dead silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Beedrill beat its wings with a deep, resonant hum, those crimson compound eyes gleaming with a sharp, focused light. It looked at the rampaging Mytyena before it without the slightest trace of fear. The Mytyena, rattled by this sudden turn of events, let out a furious roar and lunged at Beedrill. But Beedrill was faster. So fast it left only a yellow afterimage. Twineedle. Purple light crackled along Drill's stingers as it drove them clean through the Mytyena's throat in an instant. Thud. The once unstoppable rampaging Mytyena didn't even have time to cry out. Its massive body crashed to the ground, twitched twice, and went still. One-shot kill. A single strike, and it was over. The livestream chat went completely berserk, messages scrolling so fast the words were a blur. Holy sh, oh my god. 2 consecutive evolutions. That is insane. The power spike is unreal. One-shotting a berserk Mytyena. This is the power of bonds. The streamer was right to save it. I'm actually tearing up. 1 minute it's a tiny little thing, the next it's an absolute god of war. Big Wave was completely dumbstruck, jaw hanging open, unable to close it for a long moment. That was way too sudden. He was shaking with excitement from head to toe. Beedrill slowly retracted its stingers and turned around to face the protagonist. The sharp intensity in its eyes softened the moment it found him. It dipped its head slightly, folded its wings, and settled into a composed, protective stance. As if to say, from now on, it was its turn to protect him. You're incredible. Big Wave reached out and gently ran his hand along Drill's hard shell. Beedrill leaned contentedly into his palm, letting out a low, quiet hum. Just then, a stunned voice came from nearby. You. Big Wave turned to look. His companion, who had always been so cold and unshakable, was standing there staring blankly at Beedrill, then back at the protagonist. Those stone-hard, ice-cold eyes of his were, for the very first time, showing cracks. He looked shaken, struck to the core, and beneath it all, there was the faint glimmer of something like understanding. He was silent for a long time, as if reassessing the world around him, as if re-examining the beliefs he had held onto for so long. When he finally spoke, his voice was no longer cold. It was calm, and carried within it a quiet sense of release. You've shown me something I didn't understand before. Maybe this world isn't what I thought it was. He looked at Big Wave after speaking, holding his gaze for a long moment, as if he wanted to engrave that image into his memory. Until we meet again, then. He gave a small nod, turned, and walked away. The livestream chat flooded with teary-eyed emoticons. He gets it now. He finally gets it. Now that is real growth. Whoever wrote this game, come out. I promise I won't hurt you. I just want to bow at your feet. Big Wave let out a sigh and leaned into the mic. If you witnessed something like that, it really could change a person. Right at that moment, the Team Rocket executive's voice broke the silence. Not bad. Without anyone having noticed, the executive had appeared soundlessly at the entrance of the cave. He looked at the protagonist and Beedrill, and for the first time, that perpetually cold face showed a faint glimmer of approval. Principled, not sentimental. Understands power. Knows what bonds are worth. He gave a slow nod, a slight smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. That's exactly the kind of person Team Rocket needs. System notice, trial complete. You have earned official Team Rocket membership. Staring at those golden letters on the screen, Big Wave let out a long breath and slumped back into his gaming chair, feeling as though he had just lived through a real life-or-death trial. I made it, finally made it. The chat erupted into another wave of messages. Legend. Streamer is an absolute legend. What's next? Becoming the most powerful Team Rocket member. Big Wave looked at the young man standing beside Beedrill on the screen, his heart brimming with anticipation. This is only the beginning. He had a feeling the game hadn't even shown him its teeth yet. The screen slowly faded to black, bringing the first chapter to a close. But in the bottom right corner, a small countdown timer had appeared. Chapter 2, Undercurrents Rising, coming soon. Big Wave's eyes lit up all over again. Alright, brothers, 5-minute break and then we're back at it. I am not stopping until I clear this game tonight. Kairos returned to his villa in Cerulean City. He pushed open the door to a quiet house, the only sound the faint hum coming from the custom-built thermal tank in the corner of the living room. He walked over and peered inside. Omenet was sprawled at the bottom of the tank, its large eyes half open, looking thoroughly lazy and unbothered. Kairos opened the feed cabinet beside it, took out a small bag of ancient Pokémon food he had ordered online, and poured it into the feeding trough. The little creature perked up immediately. Its tentacles shot out, and it hauled itself out of the tank with a plop, shuffling cheerfully toward the trough. Kairos watched it eat, turning things over in his mind. The little one could already move around freely outside the tank, its adaptability far better than he had expected. Evolution, on the other hand, still seemed a long way off. Ancient Pokémon had notoriously demanding evolution conditions to begin with, and Omenets were particularly strict, requiring specific environments and time. There was no rushing it. Better to just let things unfold naturally. Just as he stood there watching Omenet feed, the shadows behind him suddenly twisted. A grey-black figure rose up through the floorboards and drifted over to Kairos's back. Marzhado dropped down onto his shoulder. Hey, where did you go? It's so boring when you're not home. I don't exactly want to go wandering around outside on my own. Kairos didn't turn around. He reached up and peeled it off his shoulder. Went to another world for a bit. Working on ways to keep restoring the faith of that great Ho-Oh of yours. The moment Marzhado heard that, its entire body snapped to attention and it hovered upright in midair. Oh, well, in that case, you don't really need to rush back next time. I'm not that bored, honestly. Kairos rolled his eyes. Wasn't it just saying how bored it was? Relax. Rushing won't help. Everything takes it one step at a time. He crossed to the sofa and sat down, pulling up the system panel out of habit. Just moments ago, a task completion notification had popped up. New task triggered. Task description: host has obtained the virtual reality module. Please develop a virtual reality game centered on the theme of villains and release it into the first new world. Task reward: to be determined based on the game's popularity among players. Time limit: 7 days. Beyond the task itself, there was also the reward from completing this one, a special system item called Module Masterwork Upgrade. Its effect was straightforward: it could be applied to a designated creation module to trigger the module's evolution. Kairos scanned his current list of modules, and without much hesitation, selected the virtual reality module. Once the upgrade was confirmed, the module's description updated rapidly. After the upgrade, the virtual reality module's graphics and overall experience would be significantly sharper and more immersive. The most critical change was that players would no longer need to wear any kind of headset equipment. With nothing more than a thought, they could enter the game using pure mental projection. The game also had built-in safety mechanics, meaning players would suffer no real harm within the virtual reality. Upon death, they would simply be ejected from the game. As for death penalties, Kairos could design them himself, or choose to have none at all. Kairos stared at the upgrade details for a good while. This new module was something else entirely. He could try it out with the next game and see just how far this improved experience actually went. With that thought, his gaze drifted to the Pokeball sitting on the table beside him, and something came back to him. Inside it was the Miraidon, still in a brick state, completely unable to move. He wanted to fix it, but clearly didn't have the technical know-how himself. So who could he turn to? Kairos furrowed his brow and thought it over. Would Ho-Oh be able to handle something like that? He glanced over at Marzhado. Hey, Marzhado, do you think Ho-Oh could repair things? Marzhado perked up the instant Ho-Oh was mentioned and floated closer. Repair things? What do you need to repair?
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200+ audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.